Mic check.
We're all good, Q. We're live.
Oh, we are live. Haha. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to the rest of you. It is I, your fearless leader, coming back to you from my mother's basement. I'm joined today by special guest Lawrence Lepard. Lawrence, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks. Nice to have me back. Thanks for having me back.
Thank you for coming on and joining us. And before we kick things off and dive into things, we were talking a little bit about the Bitcoin conference in Miami. I know you were there last year. What are you most excited for to see this year in Miami?
Well, I like meeting all the people. You know, you do the Zoom stuff, and it's not nearly as personal as meeting folks. You know, and shaking their hands, sitting down and chatting with them one on one. So, everyone's going to be there, and I'm really looking forward to that.
Well, if those of you who have been living under a rock or mute yourselves during the moments when I say this, use code YTMAG, get 10% off your tickets. Come hang out with all of us in Miami. Ticket prices go up on Friday. You have been warned. Do not act surprised when all of a sudden the ticket is $100 more tomorrow. Today is the last day for those cheap tickets. Use code YTMAG. Otherwise, Chris, my producer, and I will not be working here after the conference. So smash that buy button, smash the like and subscribe as well. Lawrence, the world is in chaos right now. We have been in a pandemic for over 2 years, and it seems like it's not going away with the latest new variant upgrade coming up, or whatever you want to call it. We are in the midst of hopefully not entering nuclear war in Eastern Asia. We watched a democratic republic, I guess not a democratic republic, but a democracy up north of the border, essentially shut off access to your banking and finances. Not to mention hyperinflation going on across the world. America seeing inflation in double digits. Initially, what is of everything going on? What is it that you are paying closest attention to at this moment?
Oh, that's a great question. There's so many things going on. I mean, yeah, all the stuff you referred to. I mean, this is what fourth turnings are, right? I mean, they're really chaotic, and bad shit happens, right? And it's happening. I mean, I probably, day to day, obviously, I'm watching the price of gold, the price of Bitcoin. I'm also watching the bond market. I think it's a real clue as to how much control the Fed has, and the fact that the 10-year has been going higher pretty relentlessly now for a while indicates to me that more and more people are waking up to the issue that the fiat money is bad. And who wants to own a 10-year bond when it pays you 2 point something percent, and inflation is ticking in at 7 now? Well, stated inflation is ticking in at 7.9. We all know real inflation is much higher than that. I mean, probably saw I tweeted out yesterday the rent index. I mean, I think it's 17% year on year, right? And of course, the part of the owner equivalent rent that gets caught in the inflation number is like 3 or 4. I mean, it's just statistical lying. It's beyond the pale what these folks are doing. But so it's hard. I mean, I watch it all. Obviously, the war is a big deal. We can talk about that, but I mean, I like to say I think Putin just shot King Dollar in the head. It's, you can say the war is about the Ukraine. You can say it's about his security situation. You can say it's about missiles and them joining NATO. I actually think it's about a bigger issue. I think it's about, he's tired. He's got a natural resource rich country that doesn't, have a lot of manufacturing base, but boy, they do have resources, natural gas, oil, and wheat. And he's tired of selling it for paper money that can be printed. And, he got in bed with the Chinese, who obviously kind of somewhat reached the same point, and they decided he decided to declare war, and then we responded in kind by shutting off his SWIFT access, which is bad, but not nearly as bad as the next thing we did, which was we grabbed his foreign currency reserve. So, where's the rule of law in all of this? I mean, I guess in war there is no rule of law, but the point is that the West used to stand for the rule of law. And when you see what Trudeau did in Canada, and then you see this move, you can't help but say to yourself, this isn't good, right? I mean, his possession is about to become 9/10, and if possession is 9/10, I know the thing I want to own, right? 12 words. Unless you torture him out of me, you can't take it. So.
Maybe for better or worse, that I have the worst memory and can't remember. My seed phrase is 24 words, and it's probably for the best because you pinch me hard enough and I'll blast them out, but I don't remember them. So joke's on you.
There you go.
I want to ask a little bit, because I know you talk a lot about how you have gold as a hedge. We've
Yeah.
heard a lot about how Putin has been hoarding gold for the last few years as well.
Yeah.
We have Peter Schiff, the perma bear for Bitcoin and perma bull for gold. What is in the gold market in specific? What is it that you're paying attention to, and what is it that you're seeing that's a positive? And also, what is the thing in the gold market that you're a little tepid around, or maybe don't think?
Yeah. Well, obviously I pay attention to the price. And of course, it's no doubt that, whenever something happens that's enormously gold friendly, gold sells off. And that's because of the paper gold market. I mean, look, what just happened, what Putin just did is just like it's like an amazing, gold should be at 2,500, right? But it's not, because the powers that be on the other side can create a lot of paper gold and sell into the market and flood it and then bring it back down. So pay attention to that. At more of a macro level, I'm watching the offtake numbers, and, Russia's buying, China's buying, India's buying, coins are getting, coin sales in the US are going up, other countries as well. Dealers are tight, premiums are high. So, there's a lot of accumulation and purchasing of physical. And to me, that's important, because the physical market is what will eventually break the paper market. You can't print a physical ounce, right? So I'm watching that. What are the weaknesses of gold? Well, obviously the paper manipulation and the fact that nobody knows who has what. And, the 8,300 tons that we theoretically have, we haven't audited them for years, so we don't know if we really have them. There are lots of weaknesses around the edges. I suppose, to me, the reason I've stayed in it, and the reason I think it's going up, perhaps not up as high as Bitcoin goes in the longer run, but it's still going up, is that, there are a lot of people in the world who have a vote on this. And, the Chinese have a vote, the Russians have a vote, the Indians have a vote, the Saudis have a vote, et cetera. And the world will eventually, in my opinion, migrate to Bitcoin as a superior solution. But, I emphasize the word eventually. I think the Bitcoin community kind of assumes it's going to happen instantly. and I don't know that it will. And so there's a role for both. They both represent good potential candidates for a neutral reserve currency, which is what the world really needs. We've been misallocating capital for so long. The zero interest rate policy has been horrible, and it's showing up, right? It's why suddenly we've got this huge demand for commodities, and we can't produce them quickly enough. Why? Because, we've underinvested in commodities for the last 10 or 15 years. Why? Because the price signals have said there was no reward for investing in commodities. Go chase stocks and FANGs and NFTs and all kinds of other bullshit. So, we need to get the price signals back to the point where they're real and they're honest and they reflect supply and demand. I've said this on Twitter several times. There's no price in the world right now today that we know if it's the right price, in fiat terms. And that's what moving to a sound money standard will solve, but it's going to take time, right?
Yeah, Lawrence, and definitely to your point, like obviously you reiterate that gold that can get dumped on by paper manipulation of the currency. While obviously gold itself is a bearer asset, obviously Bitcoin is the digital bearer asset. So I guess my question to you is, while we've seen Gary Gensler over at the SEC block countless spot ETFs, obviously there's the futures one, which isn't a great, and I actually don't recommend anyone buy it unless you're a hedge fund or you're doing these quants or whatever. I think it's a good thing that it keeps getting denied. I know a lot of Bitcoiners and other people would like it to get approved, in the sense that it would make the price go up in theory, because more people would be buying it in their retirement accounts and 401ks and such. But I guess my thing is, it's like pushing forward the idea that you need to be self-custodying your Bitcoin. And obviously there are a couple companies that do offer services that do that. It's obviously a little bit more complex. Do you see that as a benefit or a downside to basically this spot ETF getting denied? And I guess, what are your theories behind them denying it anyway?
Yeah, well, why are they denying it? I'm not sure. I suspect powerful interests are putting pressure on them not to do it. I think I slightly differ with you. I think having it would be good. Just it'd make it easier for more people to buy it. People don't buy GBTC because, well, it's at a discount, therefore there's something wrong with it. I don't think that's really the case, but knowing those people. But I think I'm not sure why Gensler's not going for it. I think there are powerful interests in the banking community, from what I've seen, what I've read, that have done everything they possibly can to slow down, the development of digital assets and Bitcoin as alternatives to their system, and or to control that development. I mean, I'm invested in a company called Avanti, which is run by Caitlin Long, and it just changed its name to Custodia. And she's trying to get access to the Fed and the Fed wire. She's trying to really play by their rules and play by their game and be an alternative to Tether, which I believe is a fraud. And she's been stymied at every round. And the banks have basically said, to the degree that we're going towards digital currencies, we want to be a player, we want to control it. They have to have federal bank charters, which is absurd. It's completely absurd. So they've tried to shut the whole DeFi community down. And to me, that's wrong and that's bad. And, we need more Senator Loomises around to fight for the other side, because we got plenty of senators who are on the bank payroll. So, that's going to take time. And whether we get a Bitcoin ETF or not, I mean, you make a great point, which is, when you've got Trudeau saying he can seize your assets, and when you've got, Biden coming out with an executive order saying, I want you guys to all go back and figure this shit out. I think personally, it's only a matter of time before they ask people, how much Bitcoin do you have? Where is it? They ask Coinbase to report who their customers are, how much they hold, et cetera. I mean, when we saw some horrible things, like, I don't know if you picked up on the Coinbase guys going after, they would say they were going to maybe freeze Russian accounts at Coinbase. I mean, WTF? I mean, that's not what this is about, right? I mean, and so what it tells me, and look, I'm extremely cynical, but I think with a fact pattern to back it up, I'm extremely cynical about what the powers that be will do to protect their privilege, because I've seen them do it. I mean, they did it to the Hunts. They did it to me in 2008 when they banned the short selling of financials. Trudeau tried to do it to anyone who sent $50 to the truckers. We just did it to the Russians. I mean, they did it in nickel, right? I mean, they just changed the nickel rules basically to protect, the LME, which is now a joke, and to protect the billionaires that were, short nickel, one of whom was financed by JP Morgan. So, Jamie Dimon's company just got saved from $1.5 billion loss if they'd let nickel price discovery really occur. And somebody who owned those large nickel, long positions was, in my estimation, cheated out of $4 billion, so, and perhaps more if it had gone, to the moon. So the point I guess I'm getting at is, owning an ETF, owning a Bitcoin ETF, yeah, right, good thing, better than owning, FANGs, right? But really, doesn't ultimately solve your problem. I mean, the way you ultimately solve your problem is you have your own keys and you self-custody this stuff. Because I believe, and I have many good friends who are involved in all parts of this business. I believe before this is all over, they're going to come after us. They're going to come after the Bitcoin guys. They're going to come after the gold guys. They're going to blame us for ruining their beautiful system. Sound money. I mean, we're going to become like anti-vaxxers or, whatever. They're going to demonize us. And so, fine. If that's how they want to play the game, so be it. I got my 12 words, right? and possession is 9/10, and these are bearer assets. I mean, look, we know because they've signaled they would like to eliminate cash and they would like to shove us all into CBDCs. That's a fact. We know that. So, they're going to go in that direction, I think. Now, the tough part is knowing how, when, what, et cetera, because, they're crafty and we can't know every move they're going to make and when they're going to make it. But you can see the writing on the wall. That's how I view it.
Lawrence, you mentioned now a couple of times the way the paper gold market is manipulated, the way some of these commodities get sort of limited in how much their gains are and get toyed with. I personally believe the entire oil market is just a nice big cartel out there to rake in as much money they can against us. How are any of these things, gold included, different than fiat money that gets manipulated? And
they're not. I mean, they're not. They're really all extensions of it. And I talked about this in another podcast recently. I mean, when and the reason, how do they manipulate these things? They do it with derivatives, right? And so let's go back to a basic premise that, which I call, table stakes poker, right? I mean, if you know how you play table stakes poker, basically you can only bet what's on the table, right? And so the person at the game that has the biggest pile of chips can basically bluff the entire game and put all their chips in, and nobody can call them. Okay. And so really, instead of what's right and price discovery occurring in any kind of a normal fashion, in a table stakes game, in a game where you have the most buying power, you've got the ability, you can control the market. And the US federal government has figured this out, in my opinion. And through derivatives, they can control the prices on all of these markets because they are the biggest people at the game. They print the money, they have the unlimited balance sheet, and they have offshore accounts with which to, as you say, the gold market's an entire simulation the oil market to rip us all off. And I don't dispute that. I mean, I think that's probably right. And so, if I were God and I were trying to figure out how to make it, once this fiat thing collapses, and I think it will collapse, and I were trying to restructure the new system. I mean, one, I'd put sound money as the base currency, and there are a lot of ways of doing that. It could be Bitcoin, it could be gold, it could be a bank, or it could be some combination of commodities. I mean, whatever it is, but it'd be defined, it'd be clearly defined and immutable. And then what you would do is you would say, and that makes gold a tough candidate, but then what you would say is you would also say, we're putting in Glass-Steagall and we're going to outlaw derivatives. We're going to, the futures and hedging will only be allowed insofar as it's connected to legitimate financial, commerce and activity. So that a farmer could sell his future corn production, or a buyer of corn could hedge the protection of purchasing of future corn. But above and beyond that, just pure speculation above and beyond that would be illegal, because what it leads to is it leads to these derivative chains that then allow people through leverage to push these prices anywhere they want them to be. And there's no real price discovery going on. And that lack of price discovery is what creates all these misinformed prices, which then leads to these booms and busts and the fraud that we all have to live through. It's, more or less, these people are ripping us all off. So it's a complicated problem, and the average man doesn't understand it, which is not a criticism of their intelligence. It's more just, it's a credit to how crafty and sophisticated these crooks have been, in the way they've set this thing up. So
I want to play a little bit of a hypothetical scenario along these lines.
yeah.
Let's say we are on a Bitcoin standard. Let's say the central bank somehow wise up and they say, we're going to back our fiat currency to Bitcoin, just
Sure.
Bitcoin. How do we prevent this exact scenario that we see in different commodities markets, that we've seen play out historically, from repeating itself just with Bitcoin as the backing? Because ultimately, like you've said, they either come after us right now before we succeed, or they try to ingrain us into it and then blame us when it doesn't work.
Right. Well, I think what you're alluding to, I mean, there is a futures market. I mean, there is paper Bitcoin, right? I mean, some people try and claim, well, there is no paper Bitcoin. That's bullshit. I mean, there are futures contracts on Bitcoin. I mean, you can go to Glassnode, you can see the size of them. Now, fortunately, they're pretty small compared to the overall Bitcoin market, Bitcoin trading, Bitcoin size, et cetera. I mean, one of the ways we know that gold is a manipulated asset is that we know the paper contracts and the size of the paper contracts compared to the actual physical market. It's multiples of the physical market, depending upon how you measure it. So as a result of that, we know that gold is a manipulated asset. Bitcoin could be manipulated, but it hasn't, from what I can see, it doesn't appear that it's been heavily manipulated yet. I think what you're alluding to is the possibility that they'll try and develop a system where they do that in the future. And I think the way you do that is you more or less just shut down these futures markets. You say you can't do that. We're not, I mean, it's illegal. You cannot have, if you write futures on any financial or really any object in the world above and beyond a legitimate commercial use, i.e., I'm buying corn because I need corn in the future, or I'm selling corn because I'm about to produce some, right? Go to jail, pay millions of dollars of fines, et cetera. So that's really what's got to get solved at the base of it all. I mean, if you want to have sound money, you've also got to prevent, people from layering up with leverage, and playing these games. I mean, leverage is what allows these people to push these prices around, and they can push them so far, and it's a cocked game, right? Because it's heads they win, tails they lose. Because if they lose under a leverage system, they declare force majeure and they do what they did to the Hunts, or they do what they just did to the nickel system, right? And so it's a real problem. It's all part of the too big to fail. I mean, and we got to get to a decentralized system where nothing is too big to fail, so that if you do things economically that don't make sense, you fail. That's capitalism. What we've got right now is state-controlled socialism for the rich. So
Yeah, Lawrence, I definitely agree. And I know many people are swayed or I guess leery of Bitcoin in particular because of its volatility. Obviously, you, Q, and I all know that, volatility is the price you pay for returns, and the
Right.
asset class speaks for itself. But to be honest, I actually like the volatility because it helps shake out like the manipulation that's going on. I guess the one thing,
Agree.
I know you think that having a 401k or people being able to buy a spot ETF would be a good thing. And like I said, I guess it would be good to give people exposure, but my biggest worry is then they can do exactly what they've done to gold over the years and manipulate the price through that, basically by buying the paper asset and overcoming Bitcoin's class itself. Obviously, you and I and Q can transfer Bitcoin from node to node or wallet to wallet, whatever, and we're actually moving the asset across itself. But I think I worry about if they lock it up in these long-term instruments or whether retirement accounts, that we would lose it or have issues exactly like the gold market sees right now with paper gold things. I guess I'd love your take on that.
I think it's a fair point. I think it's a fair point. And one could argue that, yeah, that an ETF, I mean, I guess one of the ways you could prevent that is, you would have an ETF that would be, completely audited so that, I mean, by multiple auditors so that, I mean, if an ETF, I mean, this is the issue with Tether, right? I mean, if an ETF does the ETF really hold the Bitcoin that it claims to hold? And if it does, then they haven't created any paper Bitcoin. But the minute the minute you get into fractional reserve anything, you've introduced another layer of complexity that then can lead to, manipulation and too much leverage and the kinds of games that we're talking about here.
Yeah, and I guess Bitcoin's different that it's easy to audit the ledger in a way. I know that you've always argued that I guess in Fort Dix that I thought supply hasn't been audited in I don't know how many years. And that's kind of another way that you can manipulate this game. Obviously, if they're saying they have a spot ETF, I think many Bitcoiners would say, fine, you can do that, but we want to see that the coins are actually there. And if they say, oh, we have X amount of coins, it's like, well, give us the address. We want to be able to see it ourselves.
Exactly. Yeah, no, and that kind of transparency should exist. I can tell you from New Jersey, because you said Fort Dix, it's actually Fort Knox.
Fort Knox.
Fort Dix was probably up the road from where you lived.
Yeah, it is very much near me. So, or at least where I used to live. But so I guess auditing the supply is very important. I guess how have they been able to get away with it in gold sense? Obviously, they've hidden the supply there and they're able to dump it with paper gold. But I guess anything else aside from like a 6102 attack. And do you think that would be able to occur in Bitcoin, or do you think it would not fare this time around?
Well, yeah, your 6102 is the number of the executive order that FDR issued. I don't, look, I mean, I suppose, I think Bitcoin's the horse that's out of the barn. I mean, I think too many people own it, too many people support it. And the US isn't generally into, seizing assets and doing that kinds of things. Although, in a national emergency, right? I mean, if gasoline is, racing to the moon, and I mean, if we've got runaway inflation, who knows? I mean, I think all bets are off. And, if you read the history of the world and you read the history of hyperinflations, you see some pretty bizarre and bad stuff happening. I mean, this weekend, I was rereading Fiat Money Inflation in France, and the assignat, when that was going on, basically gold holders who didn't report their gold were being guillotined. So, it's, I mean, desperate governments will do desperate things. I mean, I thought this, what FDR did, I mean, whether you like FDR or don't like him, and, like all humans, he had good qualities and bad. What he did was really wrong. I mean, the notion of, seizing people's assets. I mean, and I'm sure there are statists who would take the other side of it and say, no, he was trying to save the country. He had to seize those assets. Well, okay. I think in general, I mean, and he, by the way, we never would have gotten, the Constitution says only gold and money should be, or only gold and silver should be money. Of course, we've drifted so far away from that that's kind of a dead letter. But I don't know, did I miss the thrust of your question?
No, I think you hit all the points. I'll send it over to Q if he's got anything else to add.
Yeah. I got a couple, and I'd love to stay on the political sphere for a moment with you.
Sure.
First, why is it that for whatever reason now Bitcoiners seem to be so bought into any politician who says, I have a Bitcoin stance? Like, we have watched politicians lie to us generation after generation over whatever they needed to say to get a vote. But this is the time. This is the time that we're going to believe them and buy into what they say. You mentioned Cynthia Loomis earlier, who I think is one of the good ones. She genuinely understands Bitcoin and wants to help push forward legislation, or frankly, block legislation to prevent the growth of Bitcoin. I see someone else like Ted Cruz, who genuinely just has jumped at any opportunity he can, or the latest hot fad, so that he can get a few extra votes and stay in power. That's sort of the spectrum that I look at. I don't know if you see anything similar, or you agree.
Yeah, I don't follow all that stuff so much, but you make a very good point. I mean, there's some people who are just bandwagoning it, and they realize that, hey, I support Bitcoin, I get votes. So, yeah, I mean, look, in general, as we all know, politicians are not particularly trustworthy people. And, the kind of people, the worst of the people who go into that are, outright sociopaths or psychopaths. So, I think we have to be leery of wolves in sheep's clothing. And, Cruz probably is one, who knows? The good news is, though, that the penetration of Bitcoin in the younger generations is high enough now. And that younger generation, millennial vote, is becoming large enough now that I think that if politicians don't move in the right direction on this issue, it's going to cost them. And that's a very good thing. I said in another podcast recently that, I actually think that the mayor of Miami, Suarez, will be our first Bitcoiner president. I mean, it might be some years from now, but, you've got to remember that, the boomer generation will pass away and the millennial generation will grow larger and larger and have kids. And, the voting's going to change. And so politicians are, look, there are a lot of bad things, but one thing they're pretty good at is trying to keep getting the votes and staying in office. And so, the more noise we make and the bigger our block becomes, the better it is for all of us and for Bitcoin. And so that's why people say, well, what can I do? I mean, I think the most important thing any person listening to this can do is to try to educate, because these good ideas, they spread by word of mouth, right? It's just to try and educate everybody in your circle of friends and try to orange pill, or sound money pill, with gold. I kind of view gold's like gold's like the gateway drug, right? Gold's like marijuana, so that you can really get hooked on crack. Bitcoin is crack. And, if you can get people going in on gold, at least understanding the sound money argument, it's a lot easier argument to make to a boomer, then that gold bull will eventually start to realize that, hey, gold is a good weapon. Bitcoin's a really great weapon, and so you don't necessarily always want to go at them right with the, hey, you got to be a Bitcoin buyer. I think what you got, my way of looking at it is you've got to opt out of fiat. You've got to recognize that for self-preservation reasons, if you stay in fiat, you stay in bonds, you are going to get wrecked, absolutely wrecked in the next 10 years, because in my opinion, inflation is just going to rage. I think we haven't seen anything yet. I think it's going to get worse. And, it's pretty bad right now, right? I mean, $7 gas in California, $5.50 is what I paid the other day. I mean, that's real. It's getting very, very real, very, very quickly. And I don't think we're going back to the old world. We're not going back to 2 and 3% inflation. That's just not happening, in my opinion. So.
Oh, I mean, look, the tagline of inflation is transitory, I think, was one of the biggest lies that was told with a straight face in 2021.
Completely agree.
I mean, look, as someone who lives in California, let me tell you, I just got back from a short little road trip, and we celebrated finding gas that was less than $5.50, $5.39 at the Costco all the way in Palmdale. But to your point, we're seeing the price of gas go up. We have already been seeing the price of food go up, but not with the high gas prices. So we're now going to see another increase, I believe, in the price of food. This idea that inflation is transitory, to your point, is a fallacy. What do you think, if anything, the Fed can or should be doing more? They only raised it 25 basis points. I don't know if you think that's enough.
Look, I mean, the Fed could do us all a great favor by just admitting they were horribly wrong, shutting down and saying, we're going to abandon, we're going to basically sit at a Bretton Woods 3 and do a monetary reset. That's what they should do. I mean, it's like, and try and spread the pain equally and fairly and go back to a sound money system. But since that's a fantasy and the odds of that happening are zero, at a minimum, they should be raising rates aggressively if they want to defend the currency and try to, and they should take the pain of a recession I mean, sadly, given the way it's all so blown up and out of proportion, that recession would probably turn into a depression. And so, then you'd have something that looks like the 30s. And I mean, honestly, the Fed's got such a bad hand. I can't even tell them what to do, other than, I mean, I can't believe Jay Powell wanted to be renominated. I mean, he's an idiot. He's going to preside over the biggest financial calamity in the history of the world, but so be it. He chose to do it. The Fed is very badly trapped, and they will, as I say, drive a clown car between the two guardrails of massive inflation and massive deflation, and try to somehow stay in the middle. I mean, I guess the best we can all hope for, because it would probably be the least, shock painful for the world, would be just high rates of inflation that reduce the debt load over some period of time. But frankly, I don't think they're going to even be able to skate on that thin line, because I think what's going to happen is the bond market's going to revolt and say, hang on a second, this inflation is so ridiculously high that we want out of these bonds. And it's going to start to sell off and sell off hard. And then what's going to happen is interest rates, I mean, obviously bonds selling off hard means interest rates go up. Well, imagine if we had 6 or 7% interest rates in this country, imagine how bankrupt a lot of people and a lot of organizations would be. And imagine how much the earnings on the stock market would go down. And then imagine what would happen to the stock market. So the stock market would collapse, and that would be massively deflationary. And so what you have is, by distorting this thing as badly as they have completely driven us into a dead end, canyon, and there's no way out. And so, we're either going to have massive inflation or massive deflation, or some combination of both. And I think we're going to have a combination of both, where everything you need is going to be incredibly expensive, and everything you own is going to go down in value. Everything that's leveraged, all your assets, your house, your car, whatever, because nobody's going to have any money to buy anything. And in that respect, it's going to look like the 30s. And, unless they print like crazy. And so their solution to this problem at every turn is to print more money. But that makes the problem worse, because then people have less confidence in the money. And this is how you get to effectively a crack up boom and a hyperinflation, which sadly, I think is in our future. And that's because when people realize, if you study hyperinflationary history, when people realize that the government has no choice but to continue printing, and not just printing, but printing more consistently and over, generally more over periods of time, then, they're going to say, hey, get me out of this burning house called fiat, and give me something real. Give me toilet paper, give me food, give me a house, give me a car, give me whatever. But I tell you one thing's for sure, I'm not saving my money in dollars. Give me gold, give me Bitcoin. And the clue on this, will be to watch the price of gold and the price of Bitcoin. And so what's going to happen is gold's going to go through its all-time high of 2050 in summer of 2020. And it's going to go to 2,500 or 3,000, and it's going to go to 4,000 or 5,000. And Bitcoin's going to go through 69 to 100. And people are going to wake up, and it's going to be, it's going to be like being in a theater where somebody yells fire. I mean, everyone's going to say, shit, get me to the damn exit and get me there now, and the exits, which they're going to try and block, are gold and Bitcoin. And, and those are going to be the clues. And they know this. They know all of this. And that's why they may declare force majeure. That's why they may make it illegal to own these assets. That's why they may have a banking holiday. I mean, this is all akin to what happened in the 20s and 30s. I mean, this is very simple to, it's simple, but it's not understood, because the reason it's not understood is nobody who was alive during that time is alive today. If you were a financial investor in the 20s and 30s, you're dead now. But this is a sovereign debt bubble bursting, sovereign credit debt bubble bursting. That's what this is. And most people don't understand that, and they don't know how to model that in their minds. And they don't know the right assets to hold when that's happening. And so that's why we've got the trouble that we've got. And how's the government going to respond? Who knows? I mean, they're a bunch of idiots, I mean, I don't think anybody there really understands it either. I mean, there's a guy who's studying it, Jason Lowry, for the Pentagon. I hope he's advising the right people there, and I hope they're listening, because it is a matter of national security. I mean, we've got to have sound money, or else we're going to fail as a country, and by the way, if we were to adopt Bitcoin as sound money, we would leapfrog China and Russia, which would be a beautiful thing, because they've obviously made a bet on gold, a bet that gold is going to be the next form of sound money. And they could be right. I mean, I could probably see, gold as a stepping stone to ultimately having a Bitcoin standard. They both represent neutral reserve currencies. So, and gold happens to have been around for 5,000 years, and it was the last neutral reserve currency. Of course, we all abandoned it, which was silly, but we did. So here we are. So I don't know, that's kind of a rant, but I feel strongly about it. I mean, I think sound money is the most important issue in this fourth turning. I think we've got to address it. And frankly, the sooner we address it, the better. And if we can address it without killing millions of people, that would be good too. Because historically in fourth turnings, lots of people have gotten killed in wars. And there's no point in doing that. I mean, all the people are here, all the assets are still here, all the technology's here. In many ways, the world is a great place. We've made these enormous advances. We've just got this broken monetary system. And so if we could go fix the broken monetary system, things would be good. I mean, if you look at other hyperinflations, post the hyperinflation occurring, things got better when they went to sound money. I mean, sound money, it's like you guys say, Bitcoin fixes this, right? Go to a sound money standard, the price signals get correct. When the price signals are correct, capital gets allocated properly, things work. Because capital has not been allocated properly, that's why gas is $7, because capital hasn't been allocated properly. We've been destroying wealth, destroying capital, eating our seed corn. You need to plant your seed corn so that you get a harvest. And we haven't been doing that because the system's broken. So, if we want to have better living standards, I mean, from, 1900 to 1971, even in spite of all the ups and downs and problems, living standards improved enormously. From 1879 to 1913, they proved even more. And in both of those times, we were on basically a sound money standard. From 71 to present, the working man has gotten screwed, completely screwed. And that's all because of fiat currency. That's the reason. And sadly, a lot of people don't know that or understand that. But that's our job, right? That's your job as Bitcoiners. That's my job as a sound money advocate. That's everybody's job, is to educate our neighbors as to why things suck. They suck because the government has fucked up the money. The money is broken, right? It's pretty straightforward. So, but, again, we've got to get a mass of people. We've got to get it's like the American Revolution. Not everyone was a revolutionary. A lot of people were loyalists. They were just sitting around going, oh, whatever, Britain, be on our own, whatever. But, we got to get a bunch of revolutionaries who are like, no, not whatever. We don't want to live in a shitty world. Let's get back to sound money so that we can get back onto having, improved prosperity for everybody and fairness, right? It's not a kind of a whatever sort of thing. It's an obvious need that we have to unbreak the system that's broken. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah, Lawrence, I love that rip. That was a really good one, really passionate.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Once you get me started, I told you once you got me started, I was going to rant and rave. And I guess I've lived up to that, right? There's some quotes you can pull out of there.
For sure. I guess definitely, I mean, aside from being a Bitcoiner and seeing all the excess money printing, I was definitely worried in 2020, and we're kind of seeing what's the repercussions of that now. I know even probably in the tail end of 2020 and early 2021, I know people were saying, oh, my used car went up in price. I was like, guys, this is not a good thing for something that's historically a deflationary asset or a depreciating asset. Right. You drive your car off the lot and it's worth less just, the moment it leaves the lot. Right. I know for me, I bought my car. It's, I think 7 years old now, and I bought it 4 years ago. I'm almost paid off with it, but I could actually get more money now than when I bought it back then. And a lot of my friends are like, or people that don't understand hard money are like, oh, that's a good thing. I was like, no, that means the currency's failing. And I think
that's right. And furthermore, yes, you could get more money for it, but what are you going to replace it with?
Yeah, exactly.
The new car that you're going to go buy now costs twice as much as the one you're selling.
Right? Exactly. Aside from it being paid off and it's a good car and there's, minimal maintenance, there's no reason for me to sell it. But people are like, oh, this is a good thing. I was like, this is not a good thing. That's like the reason it's worth more is because the currency is worth less. And that's like something I keep hammering home as an entry point into telling people about Bitcoin. I guess I'm going to segue more. I know you brought up the bond market. It's something that you're looking at. I was talking to Dylan LeClaire yesterday. Yeah. And he was saying historically, when you look back in history, whenever the 2-year treasury passes the interest rate on the 10-year treasury, historically, we always go into a recession and sometimes depressions. It ultimately led into the Great Depression and stuff like that. So I know Greg Voss coined this term of basically like equities are the tail that's getting wagged by the dog in the bond market. We're getting obviously very close to those two numbers crossing, or the yields crossing on those two. Do you think that would be the catalyst to it falling apart, or do you think it would be a no bid in the bond market aside from obviously the Fed? I guess not that we're predictors of the future, but what do you think is going to cause this thing to unravel ultimately?
Well, those two guys are very smart, and they're both right. I mean, when the two cross the 10, that is, I mean, look, there is no doubt that right now with these kinds of pricing, prices that are taking place, that demand destruction is about to occur, right? I mean, you tell people who are used to $4 gas that gas is now $7, they're going to drive less. I mean, full stop. And that means the tire maker is going to make less tires, and the car maker is going to sell less cars, and the guy who makes the car, maybe he's going to get laid off. And, that's a recession, right? That's an economic downturn. And so yes, I mean, I think there's no question that we're about to go into a severe downturn. Related to that, I mean, is if the stock market goes down, I mean, a lot of people kind of gauge their spending based on the stock market. They look at their retirement account, they look at their stock account, and, these are obviously middle class to upper middle class people, but still, the stock market goes down 50%, they feel poorer, and they think, well, I won't take that vacation. I won't buy that new car. I won't at the margin spend that money. So yes, I think all of those things could be catalysts. And I think there's a very decent chance that I mean, if you measure it in real terms, we've been in a recession since 2008. I mean, it really, so if a company's sales grow 10% year over year, right? But they increased their prices 10% and sold the same number of units, that's not really growth, right? I mean, that's fake growth. That's inflation, not growth. And so, there's been a lot of that taking place in the economy. And, I think that there's pretty high probability that we are going to tip over into some kind of a downturn, and that people will start losing their jobs, and they'll start screaming for UBI, and they'll start screaming for more stimulus. And the stock market will be down, and this will be part of the problem that the Fed will be called to solve, right? And so I've said this to another podcast. It would not surprise me at all if then Congress said, all right, we're going to amend the laws and allow the Fed to buy stocks. I mean, it's happened in Japan, it's happened in Switzerland. A decreasing stock market will make the economy rougher, and they'll call it the USA IRA Protection Act, enabling the Federal Reserve the power to buy stocks. And okay, so the Fed will start trying to save the stock market. Well, that's fine. How will they do that? Where will they find the money? Not in taxes, of course not. They'll print the money, and of course that'll make the inflation problem worse. So, yeah, I mean, it's, we are at the point, guys, in my opinion, we're at the point where the wheels are about to fall off in a lot of different areas. Inflation is raging, the stock market is cracking, money is losing its value very rapidly. What Luke Groman calls the alarm bells, or the fire alarms are ringing. Gold is right near its all-time high, about to break out and surpass its all-time high. Bitcoin is down a bit from its all-time high, but when it went from 5 or 6 to 67 or where it went to, I mean, that was one hell of a fire alarm, right? And they'll start another uptrend soon, in my opinion. And yeah, things are bad, and there are just a lot of signals. I mean, nickel doing a GameStop, that's a signal. Oil going to 130, that's a signal, right? I mean, you're laughing about my nickel doing a GameStop.
I'm going to steal that, Lawrence. I will give you credit, but oh my God, I'm going to steal if they're doing a GameStop right now.
Right? I mean, it's crazy, right? I mean, it's like, there's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of stuff going on, and the wheels are breaking. I mean, you see the spreads in the junk bonds are starting to blow out. You see the bond market is starting to have trouble. I mean, there's some really great macro sources on Twitter, and all these people are watching all these little indicators, and yeah, things are kind of jiggy. And it could be. I don't think it'll be long before we get right back in the thick of it. So, to the degree things aren't jiggy or things appear to have calmed down a little bit, I suspect this is going to be a very tumultuous year, in my opinion. And there's going to be a lot of volatility. That's one of the things I'd like to add. I always try and make this point when I do a podcast. People have to recognize the dangers of leverage and the way these prices can swing around. And I saw, it was a really sad story. I saw on Twitter, somebody a year or so ago or 6 months ago had totally bought into the Plan B model of how Bitcoin was going to be 150 in 6 months. And so they went and they levered up all their Bitcoin. They bought, they had one Bitcoin, they owned free and clear, and they bought 4 or 5, right? And you know what happened? Bitcoin did a big correction and bang, they got blown out. Now they own 0 Bitcoin, right? Sad, right? The point is, things are going to swing around a lot. You got to know what you own. You got to know why you own it. You got to believe in the long run it's going to have value. I mean, I know in the long run, gold and silver are going to have value. I know in the long run, Bitcoin's going to have value. I know in the long run, oil is going to have value. They're all kind of proxies for energy, and energy is the one thing the world needs to run on. And so, I think if you have an investment in something that's a legitimate claim on energy, it'll hold its value. Now, but in the interim, boy, hang on. I mean, remember in early 2020 when oil was negative 37 bucks because nobody had any place to put it? I mean, that's volatility, right? And we could have more of that. So, I mean, I think Bitcoiners, some people say, well, holy shit, we've got to be close to the bottom. Maybe we are, but I don't know. Could Bitcoin go to 18,000 briefly? Yeah, it probably could. I mean, I'd be buying the shit out of it. It'd be a gift from my point of view, but I'm sure there's some people who'd be freaking out. I mean, I was buying Bitcoin at 3,600, after I bought some at 17,000 in Thanksgiving of 2017, when everyone else was hot on it. I was too. I had owned more before, and it went down to 3,500, and people were terrified, and I was like, nah, this is, I was like, nah, in for a dime, in for a dollar, and I doubled down, and that's the way people have got to look at this. They've got to understand what's going on. I mean, it's like you're in a plane and all the dials are going nuts. And you gotta hang out a stick and figure out what you're gonna do. So it's tough. I mean, there's no doubt it's tough. But the other message I would give to people that I think is very important is just get off the dime. I mean, if you don't have any sound money investments, you're nuts. I mean, given the optionality here and the upside, the extreme upside in gold, I mean, if they do here's a number that I think is a useful number that you guys will appreciate. In 1971, the amount of gold the US owned actually backed the money supply. So if you took the money supply and divided by the amount of gold, you got to 35 bucks, roughly, okay? In 1980, same story, gold was 800, the money supply had grown. You still kind of gold backed the money supply. It wasn't perfect, but I'm just rounding for convenience, okay? If you did that same math today and took the amount of gold the US claims to own and divided it by the money supply, gold should be at $78,000 an ounce, okay? That gives you a sense of how much money supply we've created in comparison to gold. I mean, it's insane. It's absolutely insane. So, am I suggesting gold's going to go there? No, I'm not. You can do a fractional reserve, or you can do a partial coverage gold system, which Britain did throughout the 1800s, where all you need is about 30% of your money supply to be covered by gold. And that would imply gold's going to 25,000. So, but the point is that there's a lot of, we have lived for a long time in a fiat money system. We have gotten way out over our fiat skis. We have not honored hard money. And I think the trend has changed. And I think we're about to honor hard money in a big way. And therefore, I think these things aren't just going to go up. They're going to go up by multiples. I mean, the last gold bull market we saw was the 70s. We started that gold bull market with gold at $35. We ended with gold at $800. That's 23x in 10 years. Okay. I'm not suggesting we're going to do 23x on gold today, but I am suggesting that if you don't own some gold today or some silver today or some Bitcoin today, you're out of your fucking mind. I mean, seriously. And if you understand this stuff, if you study the monetary system, that's how I see it.
Why silver?
Well, it's not the perfect monetary metal, and it was demonetized in the past historically. China and India suffered from that. And silver's always been, the poor man's hard money because it was smaller, more divisible, and easier for small transactions. But there's actually another case for silver today, and that is its use in so many of the ESG friendly things. I mean, it's important in solar, it's important in a lot of electricity applications, it's important in electric cars, it's, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a market for both gold and silver. And the other reason why silver is, most of the gold that's been produced over time, there's about 180,000 tons of it in the world, still exists. I mean, it's either on some woman's neck or bracelet, or it's in a vault. Silver gets used up. There's no big stock of silver sitting around. You can't go and say, oh, there's 3 years worth of silver supply above ground. No, there's not. There's probably a half a year above ground. We use 900 million ounces of silver every year. Okay, and about half of that gets used in industry, and about half of it goes into investments in jewelry. Okay, but every year we got to start anew and go mine it. And so that's why when precious metals go into a bull market, silver runs much harder, much faster than gold. And the reason is gold's got a big stock to flow. Silver doesn't have much stock. There's just flow. So if suddenly everybody wants silver, there's no stock to go draw on. You gotta produce it. You gotta pull it out of the ground. And that's why, if gold, I mean, the typical rule of thumb for me is if gold goes up 10%, silver goes up 30 or 40%. And that's kind of held true in the past. So.
I also want to touch on and have this conversation with you, because I think we see this the same way. You brought up the fact that, there are all these derivatives markets. You can buy a double levered or triple levered NASDAQ index. The stock market itself is just a glorified, legalized casino. And yet somehow, some way we tie that and say that this is the health of our economy. In a future scenario where Bitcoin is sort of our standard, how do we prevent this type of manipulation that we see in stocks and equities from seeping into Bitcoin, knowing full well, like I can go on BitMEX right now and go lever all the Bitcoin in my wallet and I don't know,
blow it away.
Genuinely, I'm getting chills and scared of doing that. But I'm also
right. Well, it's interesting because that's part of how the 29 bubble occurred. Back in 1929, you could buy stocks on 10% down. You put up 10 cents, you could buy $1 worth of stock. And that's how we had that bubble. And that's why the SEC, when they set up, the new rules post that, they said you have to have a 50% margin requirement. And so today in your brokerage firm, you can go buy a stock and, if you put up 50%, which strikes me as actually pretty reasonable. Obviously you're taking more risk, but if people want to do that, let them do it. I don't know. I mean, that falls under the category of investor protections. I mean, I've seen the FTX guys, I saw him. I mean, that guy kind of reminded me of the guy in The Big Short, the derivatives guy in The Big Short. You remember the really creepy one? Yeah. I mean, it's just like, these guys are just like, they're sharks. I mean, they're like, please lever your shit up because we know we'll own it. I mean, you get levered, we create volatility. Guess what? The shit you own, it's ours now. So, I don't know. I mean, I'm a solid money guy, and therefore I'm generally speaking very opposed to leverage. Now, whether the government should restrict it or there should be laws restricting it, I mean, I think the leverage created by derivatives, that should definitely be restricted because it's kind of unlimited. If we need investor protections to prevent mom and pop investor from getting too leveraged, I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of a libertarian, so I'm kind of like, well, let people do whatever they want, but I could argue both sides of that one, right? That leverage, if people want that leverage, give it to them, let them do it. I mean, they're going to get hurt by it. I don't know. It's a tough one.
I'm definitely on your side, Lawrence. I'm all for it if you want to do leverage, but when the unwind happens, don't come crying for a bailout from a government.
That's for sure.
Whatever. Yeah,
that's for sure. Yeah, I mean, because all the Wall Street firms went and did that, and then it's heads I win, tails you lose, right? I mean, I've seen Lloyd Blankfein, holding forth on Twitter, and every time I get a chance to, I scold him and just say, dude, STFU, because you should be bankrupt. I mean, your firm was bankrupt and we bailed you out, right? I mean, you don't have any moral authority to hold forth on anything, so.
The infamous line in The Big Short when he's like, at the end of all of this, they're just going to blame the poor and middle class people, and they're going to be the ones picking up the bill at the end of the day too. And it's insane. It's
always the case. It's always the case. The other great part, my favorite episode of that whole movie was where Ben Rickard is chiding, they're partying, the young guys who finally hit it big are partying about how, and he gets all over them about how, guys, shut up. This is bad. People lose their job. And it is. I mean, we talk about this stuff lightly, but what's going on here is horrible. It's absolutely horrible. I mean, in my view. And, okay. I mean, and will I benefit, if things go the way I predict? Yeah, I probably will. I mean, not probably will. I obviously will benefit. And I'm just trying to protect myself, make it to the other side. But, I'm not a central banker. I didn't create the Federal Reserve. I didn't do ZERP for 15 years. I'm trying to help people protect themselves. And then I'm trying to argue. And it's not like I'm just sitting here throwing rocks and criticizing. I actually see a solution. There is a solution. There's a great solution. We got to follow it. We got to go back to sound money. This is not hard, folks. So it's, Ron Paul knew that, right? And, he pushed hard for that. I ran a couple of national newspaper ads, to support him. I read one in the Journal and one in USA Today. I mean, sound money is the great moral issue of our time. And sound money is what this fourth turning is all about, in my opinion. And, the thing that's in our favor is that people are smart, people are honest. And those of us, I think once we get to the point where those of us who understand, when we get to the point where the world understands how important sound money is, the world outnumbers the elites. The elites are the ones who benefit from the unsound money system. There are a lot more of us than there are them. And so all we need to do is create a big enough mass of people who understand this, and we'll fix it. And that'll be good. Our kids will live better. Their kids will live better. It'll be a better world.
I want to play a little bit of honestly, I don't even want to call it a game. I just want to say, I want to create the Big Short sequel, and we're going to call it The Biggest Short. I think Brad Pitt was the one who had the line in The Big Short where when his cohorts, the two young guys, celebrated essentially making all of the money that they did on their short, he reminded them, you guys got rich because now a bunch of people are homeless.
Yeah, that's what I just talked about. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to kind of go now playing with Bitcoin and this scenario that we are in, where we there's something going to collapse, whether it's going to be the stock market, whether it's just going to be your bank account literally being worthless and us having to take wheelbarrows of dollar bills to the grocery store because Visa collapsed, or whatever that scenario is. Who do you think are the biggest losers in a scenario where Bitcoin becomes the standard?
Well, the people who have the most fiat currency, and the wealthy. I mean, it's, and I'm rooting for this day. I mean, the fiat masters have gotten wealthy off of fiat, and generally speaking, they don't like Bitcoin. They hold all their money in fiat. They're going to be bankrupt. I mean, and it's going to be really hard. It's going to be really hard when a guy like Jay Powell, who has a $100 million net worth, has a zero, is bankrupt, goes zero. And it's going to be really strange for him to be looking at guys like you and me and other guys, and suddenly our net worth is what his used to be. And that's going to be kind of strange, for people who have all the money. The people who have all the money, they're not going to be able to make the rules anymore. And, the Bitcoiners are going to have all the money. And so, the Bitcoiners are going to elect the politicians and create a system. And hopefully we're going to be humble and smart enough to create an honest and a fair system. And, to remember that, what got us here and how we got here and what was wrong with the old system, and to fix it. And there'll be all kinds of things that'll get put in, like, term limits and so on and so forth. But I mean, that's how, and perhaps it's naive, but rather optimistically, that's how I see it playing out. There'll be enormous pain, but when fiat collapses, think about it. The fiat masters, I mean, they have the power they have because they have a lot of money. I mean, they can buy the government, which they've done, right? If suddenly their money doesn't spend, and the people who have sound money, our money will spend, and the roles are reversed, right? I mean, it's like the Bible, the first shall be last, and the last, I mean, that would be pretty stunning, right?
I don't disagree. I think that would be a dream scenario. However, I want to push back because, for example, if a high net worth individual, let's just call it someone with 10 million or more, has a 1% allocation to Bitcoin in the last minute, that's still them putting aside $100,000 onto Bitcoin. And let's say that's not even a whole Bitcoin, but at least they're able to make a flash buy very quickly versus the person who is, working at my local dry cleaners or making my sandwich at Subway or wherever it is. They're not as easily accessible to that while still also being tied to that fiat system. I love the notion and idea that Bitcoin could even help turn into or introduce term limits in Congress. Like that is, I think, one of the biggest setbacks in our political system, is that we do have, in essence, these kings and queens who just stay behind the shadows and let a fall person go in front of everyone else and say, well, no, this person, you took them out. Meanwhile, Nancy Pelosi has been in power for 20 years almost, and Mitch McConnell is no different. He's been in power for close to 40.
Yeah.
I'm curious on that point. How do we get there? Because you tell me how to do it, and I will spend the rest of my life getting us to a point where Congress has term limits.
Yeah. Well, again, hang on just one second. Hey guys, I'm going to call you. You can come in, but just try and keep the temperature down or sound down. Okay. Yeah. So, I think the fiat collapse is really the key to it all. I mean, and that's what it's going to take. What I'm talking about, these are radical things, and radical change doesn't occur unless you've got, an enormous event and a crisis. And so that's my sense of what it's going to take to get your term limits and to get these people thrown out of office. And like I say, it's all pretty sad, but it is what it is. And, in a way, to me, it makes me optimistic, because I think on the other side of this, things are going to be pretty good. But in the interim, it's like turbulence ahead, right? And lots of it. That's kind of how I see it. So, guys, I'm going to have to. I don't know. Would have been going about an hour now, or because
yeah, we've been going about an hour.
Okay, I could probably go another 10 or 15 minutes, but
yeah,
I've got some reasons I got to wrap up in some reasonable time frame here.
No worries at all. If you need to hop, you're more than welcome to hop. We don't want to hold you hostage. I could genuinely talk to you, I think, for the rest of the day. Well,
why don't we do one or two more and then call it a day?
For sure. Chris, I'll pass it on to you because I've been talking for too long.
Yeah, Lawrence, I definitely want to touch on a point that you made earlier. Like right now with the fiat system, they're able to buy their way to make their own rules. I guess the benefit of Bitcoin particularly is, even if we have a lot of Bitcoin, we still don't own the rules of the protocol. I mean, we abide by them. That's what it is with running your own node or having your own keys. But ultimately, the rules of the game are set and we just play by them. So yes, I think we'd be able to elect politicians that are definitely wise and smart with decisions, especially when it comes to money. But I think it just, like you said, it makes it more fair in the system that we will have set and built, basically. I guess, is there anything that you want to expand on that?
No, I mean, not really. And I apologize. I've got some background noise going on here that I can't control, but no, the new system will solve a lot of these problems. And unfortunately, I mean, the only thing we can do is work hard to accelerate the process of the old system failing. I mean, the point I've made on other calls, and I think it's important, is, and some people, they fear what's about to happen. And it's not, I fear it. It's not going to be great the next 5 years, but, this is like the system. We all know the system's broken, and it's like, we got to rip the Band-Aid off, right? I mean, and it's going to hurt, but, let's just do it. I mean, let's just do it. And let's try and get as many people as we can into the sound money boat where they'll be protected. And then, and then as we win, so to speak, let's remember the humility from the movie and try to work hard to push hard to create a system with the term limits, with all the things you guys are talking about, with, to fix the system. And that, that's what I see. That's the task of your generation, right? I mean, my generation will be fading away in the next 20 years, but your generation is going to be grabbing power. And, you got to take that power and use it to fix a broken system. And you will, because you're the hero generation. You will. And I have no doubt about it. It's going to happen. But, I will say with high probability that there are going to be a lot of ups and downs and bad events. It's going to be tough for all of us. It really is. But, I mean, maybe this is, we're paying for it being a little too easy, a little too long under the old system. But again, I apologize for the background noise. We haven't had our house cleaned in a long time, and we just got some cleaners to come over. And, so I got a vacuum cleaner going that I can't really control, and I can't send them out. So maybe we can wrap it up.
You're all good, Lawrence. We really
Okay.
appreciate the time. We will let you go about your day. Excited to get to meet you in person in Miami. For everyone who has enjoyed this conversation, make sure you get your tickets. Make sure you come down and join us and see us down in Miami. Use code YTMAG to get 10% off. Lawrence, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah,
We're
if you
going to
see
cut
me
to
in
a quick
Miami,
commercial.
make sure and come up and say hello. I'll try to be as open and available as possible. I'm looking forward to meeting you guys.
We're going to have a lot of fun down there, guys.
Yeah, we
You
are.
don't want to miss
It'll
out.
be good. Okay, take care, guys. We'll see you.
We're going to cut to a quick commercial break. And in the meantime, stick around and we'll be back with a new episode of The Breakup. What is up, fam? We are back. No, we have not started the episode of The Breakup yet. It's just me and our fearless producer and leader, Chris. I guess I messed up yesterday a little bit. We were just kind of joking about that, but I wasn't supposed to tell you guys about all the awesome comedians, I guess, but I'm allowed to now. So yeah, Sound Money Fest. We've talked about it ad nauseum here. The Bitcoin conference. You've heard us complain to you guys to show up already. You know, if you don't know the code YT YouTube Mag for Bitcoin Magazine, that's what it stands for. Use that code so Chris and I can keep our jobs. If you all you can do is that Saturday, like Sound Money Fest is just going to be a banger of a party. But you know what? If you're not a music guy, if that's not your vibe and you're more of a comedian and you like to laugh, dude, we're having one of the most epic comedy stages set up at a music festival. As of right now, the headliner is Hannibal Buress. I may or may not have accidentally slipped who the bigger headliner is yesterday. So if you really want to find out, feel free to go back and watch yesterday's interview with Guy Swan, but I'm not going to repeat my mistake. I mean, look, I've seen Hannibal Buress perform live countless times. I'm a huge fan of him, both on screen and on a stage. He's definitely far better as a stage performer than he is on camera, let me tell you. And the dude is just going to sit there and make fun of us and Bitcoin for so long, and it's going to be great. It genuinely is. I mean, I don't know if you have any thoughts on any of the comedians that are performing, Chris, but I'm most excited for the big fella himself, Hannibal.
No, I'm really excited for all of them to come on stage. I think it's going to be funny. You know, if you can't take a joke, especially if you're the punchline, I think you shouldn't, not that you shouldn't enjoy comedy, but if you can't take a punchline, being the punchline, you can't really enjoy comedy. So I'm looking forward to them grilling us. I'm sure they're going to conflate crypto and Bitcoin, which, it's fine. I get it. They don't get it, but hopefully we can explain by the end of the week or by the end of the night when we have beers with them or whatever afterwards at the bars, that they understand the difference between Bitcoin and crypto and why it's so important. Anything else you want to add to that, Q?
Christian Colbert, I dare you to show up to the conference. I will kick your ass so fucking hard. Cut to a commercial.
What up, guys? We are back. Still just waiting on Nolan here to get in. It's looking forward to the conference for sure. April 6th through the 9th. We're 19 days away and really looking forward to it. Obviously, go to b.tc/conference to get your tickets. To get your conference tickets, use code YTMAG for 10% off your conference tickets. And really looking forward to Industry Day, then 2 days of GA, and then 1 day of Sound Money Music Festival. Obviously, two things that I am super excited for is Seed Signer being up on stage and being a speaker, talking about the different iterations of his device. Obviously, a hardware wallet that's trying to be cheap and easy and for use by all. It's a really cool technology. I definitely recommend you guys check them out. Seed Signer on Twitter, or I think you can go to seedsigner.com. It's a device that you can build yourself with just at-home parts from a hardware store. And also, you can also check out the Impervious browser. I'm really excited for the developers there. They have a really cool product. It's Google without Google. It's Zoom without Zoom. It's Dropbox without Dropbox. Like, they're definitely hyping it up. I just hope that I'm not let down with all the things that they're promoting. And I think that would be a great in collaboration with Get Zion, or Zion is the name of the app. They're trying to be a social media that you can't be censored. Their CEO, Justin Rizvani, has said multiple times, he's like, if the government or someone were to hold a gun to my head and say, you have to censor X, Y, and Z, he's like, I literally can't. Because it's built on top of Bitcoin. Obviously, he did say, people asked him a great question. If someone were doing something heinous or illegal, what could we do with that? And he's like, there's no way to stop the communication outward, but people can block the content that they see. So let's just say Q and I were interacting and we saw someone posting something we didn't like. We can collaboratively take the effort to block seeing anything that they post. Obviously, if they're posting things, they're using the Bitcoin blockchain, and they will actually be penalized by losing the Bitcoin that they do to send out these messages. So it's kind of, you want to be an honest and good actor to prevent yourself from getting banned and losing the Bitcoin that's tied up in that. Obviously, you don't want to put anything more than you're willing to lose on it. And they're basically, if you're a good actor, you're just using Bitcoin to transact and send messages that can't be stopped. So those are three things that I am really, really looking forward to. Q, is there anything else that you're looking forward to before we bring on Nolan for an episode of The Breakup? He's here now.
I'm so excited for that Impervious update and just see what it looks like. I mean, we all can afford to get off of Google and stop giving Google all of our data and information. But let's take one last commercial break, and then we're going to have Nolan come on and join us for an episode of The Breakup.
Definitely.
What is up, everyone? I was just explaining what OK Boomer is going to be to our fearless leader of the breakup. But before we dive into the OK Boomer segment, we are going to be educated by our one and only Nolan. We all know the answer, but we've all got to ask it. How you doing today, Nolan?
How can you not love life? Today is one of the greatest days going. Every day is closer to the goal of hyper-Bitcoinization. Every day we're further away from our past terrible relationship with the fiat world. That's what this show is about. It's called The Breakup. And we compare relationships that go into making dollars with those relationships that go into making Bitcoin. So we kind of rag on our ex here. You know, it's kind of what the show's on. You know, crazy old thing that used to happen. And in clown world today, we see lots of people drinking and carrying on with all kinds of inebriation because whether it's clown world or not, we all love it. It's St. Patrick's Day. I'm from Montreal and my city used to celebrate, still does, I guess, probably not with COVID, but I think it's the oldest parade in North America or something like that. At least I was maybe brainwashed in the propaganda of localism in my local area to understand it to be the oldest parade in North America. Don't know if it really is or not. Montreal is one of those old cities like Boston and New York on the East Coast of America, so it's kind of believable and sounds legit. Do we know what St. Patrick's Day really was about? It's about St. Patrick, and St. Patrick was celebrated for being a Catholic priest who drove out the snakes from the island of Ireland. It turns out there's not really any snakes in Ireland at all. What it really was about was pushing out the Druidic Celtic priests and the, let's say, proselytization, the evangelism of Catholicism in Ireland at the time. So no such thing as snakes. Snakes were just symbolically linked to Celtic Druids. And we're going to talk a bit about Celtic Druidic people today, because that's really what that whole thing was about. That's what St. Patrick's Day is about. There's two real interesting qualities about the Celtic Druidic culture and society. One of them is that now in part of the propaganda from Rome, which we talked a bit about yesterday, the Carthaginians, because it goes back that far, this Celtic Druidic tradition. And part of the propaganda, we don't know if it's true or not, and I don't know anything about it, but the sacrifice, the ritualistic sacrifice. We see in Ireland with digs that it's usually animals and all that stuff. People said cannibalism, but cannibalism is always part of propaganda. So it's very difficult to, in history, see who was actually doing it and who wasn't. There's definitely evidence of it happening around the world, so I'm not arguing that it is a figment of imagination, just that I have no idea what happened in Ireland. And while they say that the Celtic Druidic people of Ireland had some bad qualities, they probably did, right? They probably had some really bad qualities. But one of the things that still, let's say, perseveres is maybe not so much the sacrifice part, but the ritualistic storytelling. So the ritualistic storytelling of the Celtic Druidic people can still be seen in wands. One tradition we have physically in Europe that came from there is still the orchestra's, the conductor's wand, right? You dance when the conductor says dance, you stop and stop playing the music when the conductor says stop. But that was actually the tool through which the Druidic monks would conduct the ceremonies. There was always a wand with it, and it was made out of the holly tree. And that's why a lot of people say, well, holly wood, right? You know, it's the same sort of ritualistic delivery of information. So you deliver information in a storytelling way and in a ritualistic way. And that brings me to my story today about ritualistic storytelling and the things you can do to legitimize a story, and how ritualistic storytelling can actually be used to launder information. And we have one of the most incredible examples today. The whole internet obviously is talking about it, and that's the Hunter Biden laptop story. So I don't want to get into all the details of the history of this story. Just remember that it was the main reason why Trump was impeached the first time he was impeached, just before COVID began. So this would be January 2020 when it was the call and all this stuff. And that all was in response to the election time story of the Hunter Biden laptop case, which was suppressed by various media outlets and said wasn't real. It turns out today we find out that it totally was real. The New York Times has printed a story completely confirming that the laptop was real. And what it ends up doing is so it looks like it's just going to get ignored. Who knows? I can't imagine a bigger story in the world, frankly, that the president of the United States might be blackmailable by what's going on over in Ukraine, but who knows? I have no idea about any of that stuff, and that's not what this show's about. I just want to talk about laundering of information today, because this process is actually copied again and again and again, and you have to see it because you can see it in vivid relief right now. And this is this ritualistic storytelling piece because it's been institutionalized in the clown world. So if we remember in Politico, for example, October 19th, 2020, just before the election, this is their title: Hunter Biden's story in Russia is disinformation. Dozens of former Intel officials say. This was signed by everyone throughout the national security apparatus in America. 50 people, they said, 50 people signed it. And of course, in the end, the Hunter Biden case story now turns out to be real. So 50 people from the US government signed a letter. Of course, there's total deniability in it, but nevertheless, what happened is this letter, probably injected into the system by people with incentives that we know nothing about, with games that they're playing with other political parties that we just don't have any insight on. And so this was declared just before the election. And now what it looks like is that laundering mechanism worked really well. You get former heads, they all look credible, and then the news can report on the very thing. And then you can even invite those people back on the show. So you can get a guy like James Clapper who will leak information to the media, then the media will talk about it, and then they'll interview Clapper about the information he leaked. In this case, they created collateral, really media collateral, which is this letter. And then the letter got reported on, and then the letter can get referred to as fact, even though it's just a bunch of people's opinions. And you should have looked, and I think a lot of people did, to everyone in the letter at the time and where their political allegiances lay. So that was all done, but obviously ignored. So this is a tweet from Comfortably Smug. If you thought it was more likely that Russians faked thousands of emails than that a crack addict forgot where he left his laptop, maybe you should get out of fact-checking business. And he does a story in 3 parts all about NewsGuard. And this NewsGuard is one of these fact-checking organizations. So this is in October 2020, a hoax perpetrated by Russians was the thing. And then just yesterday, they say they're going to, they have this NewsGuard just got a big new contract with a massive ad agency because that agency wants to avoid fake news. So, and then today we have this story. Where they have to say the laptop is real. And these guys have even been invited now by the US teachers unions. So if you're still not clear about quality education or not quality education in the public system, those few unions that still remain part of the federal body of teachers unions, because most of them have defected because of the mask mandates and all that stuff. A lot of charter school mandates have begun in about half US states right now that are no longer beholden to the teachers union, where the money will follow the students. But those half that aren't out of it still have to live with this stuff, where the websites that school computers will be able to link to will be on a splinter net that only NewsGuard, these guys, NewsGuard, fact checks first. So the fact checkers are going to fact check literally what websites can be accessed by children in schools, whichever schools they have left. So this is, obviously not a great thing. Now, it reminds me though that this ritualistic thing goes in sort of all directions. If you look on the other end now, and this is just kind of funny, I'm going to talk about Trump for a second. Let me just say that, after the last day of the last Trump presidency, I don't care about anything before, but really the last day when Ed Snowden and Assange and these guys didn't get the pardon, that to me was the end of Trump for me personally. It showed his weakness. I defended him over the years because I thought there was this, possibility that individual sovereignty and liberty could get some form of advancement through him. Sorry, just looking at this. And it didn't work out that way, and it's very disappointing. But I'm over it. You break up with all that stuff. Trump was only really good for Bitcoiners anyway in the first term. The second term, it's kind of better in life. Like, who wants to keep defending this guy, and who wants to keep, having to explain what he's doing and explain, what he meant and defend him, because obviously he's got a natural ability to get attention and get stories in the news beyond, I think, anything that we've ever seen in the world before. And he's got this new one now. So talking again about storytelling through ceremony. So now when he goes to his speeches. So once again, not supporting him, right? Not supporting him anymore. But you gotta appreciate the skill and the technique. So now when Trump goes to his rallies, he plays the Undertaker entry music from the wrestler from WWE. So the entry music, like the dong, and he's calling it dark MAGA, where in his world, he didn't go far enough. Like what I'm saying about the Assange and all these guys, he played ball with some of these Republicans and name only people, the Mitt Romneys. He's saying, oh, that was my big fatal error. I should have just gone hard MAGA. And now it looks like he's going to adopt what he calls dark MAGA. Could you imagine, had they not, kicked this guy off the internet, what kind of fear this thing would be initiating right now in some of these people who are definitely afraid. Now, I'll always admit that Trump, here's one thing I would never defend him about. I never have defended him about. He's a bully. I know that. And I understand anyone who doesn't like a bully, forget about the ideas. They probably can't get over it because the bully factor is the highest. He's the biggest bully in the world, I think. I mean, he's a real bully, right? Now, some people wanted that for the conditions as they were. But nevertheless, you got to admit that this is a guy who's really been able to take this ritualistic storytelling sort of to the next level. But that's not all. Back to the St. Patrick's Day piece. So there's two things I want to talk about this Druidic tradition, because two parts of it are actually relevant to us. The ritualistic storytelling part, really disastrous what's happening out there. Watch out for how they launder information, experts, and then you cite the expert, even though the expert is just in the bag. But you can do that all day, and it looks like it's going to work. I mean, it looks like it's going to work. I don't see people that upset. The same people who were upset before are upset again. The same people who knew the laptop was real sort of just had confirmation from the New York Times, as if it matters. But nevertheless, at least it's on the record that there is some agreed upon reality about what actually happened, and that the pictures perhaps are real and all that. Speaking of real pictures and not real pictures, we do have to mention that Zelensky deepfake that came off the internet. That's incredible. I've been predicting these deepfakes would be really difficult to manage going forward, but now we're there. And in some ways, when they used to say, well, I saw it on video. Anytime you hear yourself saying, I saw the video, I saw it on video, just stop. It's not an argument anymore. It doesn't mean anything. If you see it on a video, so what? It's like saying, I saw a movie. It's the same thing. It doesn't matter. I saw Spider-Man the other day, so what? Like it's a movie, Hollywood, right? Hollywood, it's all Hollywood now. So be very careful about this Hollywood piece and the ability to launder information, because it isn't going to stop. It's only going to get worse. And it's something you got to pay close attention to. But there are ways to pay attention to it. There are ways to sift it out. It's becoming more and more obvious what is fake news and what is not by the way it's administered, especially if you have an eye and you're trained to see it. One of the ways you can train your eye to see it is the second part of Irish culture that I want to mention. You hear this expression, the luck of the Irish, and you see all of these folks that are around, and, the leprechauns and all that sort of mythology around luck of the Irish. And where does it actually come from? It's pretty interesting history. So the Druidic Celtic folks, who I just mentioned, did the ritualistic storytelling, and that was a big part of their, religion. The other piece was really interesting, which is more or less they worshipped the energy in your blood, the fire in your blood. They were worshipers of the sun, and that energy, they said, is also within individual people, and that the energy inside of blood could actually be used to orient your life, for lack of a better word. So there wasn't really a causality to what a lot of these folks would do. It was sort of just listen for signs, and you would find it in your blood by honoring God and mastering your energy and focus and all of this stuff. Well, it turns out we don't know too much about what that side of the religion is, but we do have a bit of an idea of its inheritor, and that is alchemy. Oh, put some wind here, guys. That's alchemy. Now, alchemy, as we think about it in the West, really is just the meme version of it, which is the turning substances into gold. That was sort of a disinformation campaign to stay away from religious inquisitors, the same St. Patrick's types who were driving out the Druidic Celtic tradition. And so the alchemists really didn't care about turning lead or carbon or whatever into gold. That was all just an excuse to take private time and work on what they were really working on, which was the same blood stuff, where they believed actually you could turn your blood into what amounts to gold. I mean, really gold, right? Now, what they really meant was you could at the same time follow this energy in your blood and find gold, or make heaven on earth, make earth into heaven. So the actual luck of the Irish then is this sort of sense that if you follow your instincts or the fire in your blood, it will lead you to on a path that is sort of the alchemist's path. And you will have this, ability to transform your blood, your energy, the energy in your blood, into heaven on earth, a consecration thing. So Isaac Newton, for example, was an alchemist, and this is what he did. There was a part of sex magic to it as well, and in that he didn't have sex his whole life ever. That was a big part of what he believed gave him this energy in order to infuse his blood to have the capacity to change the world and create heaven on earth as he did. But there was all kinds of this, sort of sex magic stuff around. We even look at what's going on with, Kanye West and Kim Kardashian. And I guess we saw the story today that her boyfriend was branded, with not tattooed, but branded with a metal, poker. And that's the kind of stuff that would be a part of a lot of these ritualistic sex, ceremonies, even within the Celtic Druidic tradition, although we don't know too much about it. I don't know too much about it, but we see these, there's been a few cults that have come around where they have been doing that, and not, I guess cult is the wrong word, right? Because people choose to do these things and there are reasons why they choose them. It isn't just because they've been persuaded to. There's other reasons, which I don't know about, right? But pointing it out. So let me just get my notes here. Yeah. Anyway, point is, the Celtic tradition has these two major facets. Oh yeah, this is the point. This is my conclusion, actually, the alchemist part. And this is this shows the breakup, about ending relationships and starting new stuff. One of the interesting things when I see Isaac Newton, who was an alchemist, who was really about, controlling his own energy and manifesting a new world, it really makes me think that most Bitcoiners are actually alchemists in, I think, real ways, right? So one of the things about seed oils and its connection to sunburns is that there's an oxidation in your skin. So the opposite of why you'd want gold in your blood, right? If you had gold, I mean, obviously, metaphorically, you wouldn't burn. You wouldn't get a sunburn anymore. It's not that same, level of oxidation. And indeed, all of this time preference stuff, all of this focusing your energy on quality over, just outright growth and production, that really does have a lot of the signals, a lot of the colors of alchemists. And I think if Bitcoin didn't exist in the times that we're living in, with media as powerful it is and cancel culture the way it is, I think most Bitcoiners, when you say, what would I do without Bitcoin? I think there would be some form of secret society of alchemy that would sort of grow up. And I think that, or at least would allow people to be able to, at least see beyond some of the limitations of the current world. But Bitcoin, of course, offers us the chance, and I think Satoshi was talking about that, right? Where we've talked about now with a mathematical creation, actually creating gold on Earth, like actual, real limited amount of property that can't be manipulated by anyone else. And this offers, I think, a lot of people who are thinking of it in terms of what this shows about the breakup, that there are these new relationships and it's a whole new world out there. And it is basically the difference between being an alchemist and, sort of not. We could actually rename the show How to Stop Not Being an Alchemist. And I think it would still work, right? It's really about, heaven on earth and heaven in our, beautiful protocol. That's the show today.
How's it going, Nolan? Well, the first thing I got to say, being Irish myself, everyone's Irish on St. Paddy's Day. So you and Q, I don't know if you guys have a little bit of Irish blood in you at all.
Don't
But
forget, Nolan is an Irish surname. It is I'm not Irish, but I have the Irish surname.
I'm just saying, I am Irish and everyone's Irish on St. Paddy's Day.
Yeah.
I would just wish we were together, but we will in 19 short days in Miami Beach, and we will definitely have a beer when that happens. So expanding on your alchemy, alchemy theory, I guess, are we alchemists in the sense that we're trying to conjure up people to generate or use this new money or mine for new money, such as mining, I guess?
No, when people say go down the rabbit hole, as I understand the practice of the real alchemy, not this like I'm gonna do some random chemical experiments and try to create actual gold out of lead. Once again, that was a meme and that was a disinformation campaign in order for them to continue to do what it was they were doing, which was this sort of spiritual journey. So a lot of people who think in terms of Bitcoin, let's say being a rabbit hole, all the things you learn, let's even do it right now. When people talk about the Federal Reserve, I would not know how the Federal Reserve, I would, because this is what I studied before, but you hear people saying that a lot these days because of the rabbit hole. They understand how the Federal Reserve works just because they had this discipline and curiosity to learn about Bitcoin. I wish the same thing would apply in Ethereum with NFTs and money laundering and Hunter Biden, because I don't understand how it hasn't happened yet that this guy's an artist and is making all this money simultaneous to people being like, how are they selling all this art, in New York City? And I wonder if one of these exchanges shouldn't just hire Hunter Biden. And I think our problems for regulatory stuff and Gensler would all go away. But, that's another story. When it comes to Bitcoiners and the actual rabbit hole, I think the rabbit hole might, let's say, rhyme with the practice of alchemy, maybe.
Yeah, and even going down the rabbit hole of the art thing, not even just talking about Hunter Biden. I know Epstein and a bunch of his friends were really big art aficionados. And basically, to your point, it was kind of a way for them to launder money. If I make this squiggly painting and Nolan wants me to run for office or put his money behind me, he can buy one piece of my art for $1 million plus or however many millions. And we could say it's subjective, and you can kind of in the gray area of like, is that painting really worth $1 million? Well, someone paid that much. So according to the market, or the free market, quote unquote, that we supposedly have, it is. I think that's a really good point. And even
meanwhile, we're filling out all these $10,000 waivers all around the world like a bunch of idiots, right? You know what's the opposite of alchemy? Filling out your name on things, like filling out forms. That's the opposite of alchemy. Like that's what I don't want in the world anymore. I'm sick of it. Try and travel these days with these ridiculous apps and all this absurdity. You need a private jet. Like it's ridiculous. You know what I mean? It's ridiculous.
And tying that into, it's funny that like Janet Yellen doesn't want to increase the limit because, the $10,000 limit that you have to report to the IRS if you move money in and out of an account in excess of that. She wants to bring it down to $600.
Oh no, they want to bring it to one. They want to bring it to one eventually. There is a school of thought out there that had it one. When I first got involved with the FinCEN version in Canada, and they were coming for their statutory review, and our committee basically smashed them and told them to get the hell out of our faces with their ridiculousness, which is really how I learned about Bitcoin, sort of in its original form, in when I first approached in about 2012. They were asking Canada for $1, like is in Australia already. $1. Really? And once again, I will remind everyone, how many people do they catch a year with their scheme, with their amazing trap? The answer is none. The answer is they don't catch people with this thing. It's a scam. It's just them saying we have a thing, and it does, and then people go around it. So according to them, there is no money laundering in the world. Yet they need more laws to be more effective. And so why don't we sacrifice Hong Kong, right? And now Canada, because they're both stupid places and we don't need them. But that's what we did, right? We just gave them over. We just gave them to some bureaucracy. Unbelievable.
Yeah, Lawrence Lepard brought up a great point earlier today, just tying in the Canadian truckers and all that. He's like, we're turning into a world of law and order. At least that's what we thought in the West, to 9/10 of the law is possession. So meaning if, the bank has your money or government has your money or whatever it may be, if you go against them, the 10% that is your money, oh, well, now it's 90% the people that hold the counterparty risk. And I think Bitcoiners will bring it up all the time. You want to eliminate counterparty risk. You want to hold your own keys. Obviously, then there's security concerns. So then there's people like Kaza or Unchained, and not to bash on Unchained too much, but I don't know if you saw, Nolan, but they announced yesterday that there was a breach, and people's IP addresses, email addresses, I believe I don't know if it was home addresses, but a bunch of personal information was leaked of their clients that have vaults, or that's their custodial model where they hold the key and then you hold two. But if that information is leaked, we're trying to evade someone coming to your home and breaking in and harming you to get your Bitcoin. Well, now they can in a way.
Yeah, I would even caution folks a little more. I know people are always looking, they hear not your keys, get your keys off exchanges. We're all delinquent in it from time to, other reasons, and who knows. But I think if this ass kicking the Russians are taking over there is any key to understanding where military is headed, we've talked about it in this show a lot. We've talked about how the aircraft carriers can be neutralized by $20 drones. The tanks now, it's the vertical attack vector, right? So Obama really got this thing going where you start attacking from space, basically, or from above. We see that with the javelins and the weapons that they're using against the tanks in Russia right now, they're normalizing this attack from above. The great worry for everyone is if something does happen in the sky above America and literally everything is gone. Like, it's not about, who are you going to go to if everything gets wiped out there, because we literally don't have the communications anymore. We don't have the capacity to communicate because the satellites are actually gone. Now, I don't know the probabilities of this happening, and I'm not trying to scare anyone, but if the war did turn into space in the short term, I think the people who got their keys off of the, exchanges are in a much better place than the ones who leave them on, because that sounds like a lot of mess, and it's a lot of IOUs and a lot of what did you have and what did they have, because I just see attacking from space being the theme, the takeaway of Ukraine, Russia, and I see it going more and more, top down vertical. So definitely, if you want an alchemical subject to study, look up Star Wars, space fighting, satellite, movements, and keys away from exchanges.
Q, do you have anything else to add? I have one or two more things, but I want you to hop in. Keep going. All right. Well, now you mentioned Star Wars, and I kind of want to pivot to that, but I'll ask my next question, then we'll come back to it. So I know, to your point, obviously we say going down the rabbit hole when you're talking about going into Bitcoin and exploring it. And then, not that you get to roadblocks, while that is true, I don't know much about Bitcoin mining. I understand the general idea of how it works and how it operates. But if someone were to hand me a bunch of ASIC miners, I would be pretty lost with, aside from if I don't just plug them in and like implement them, I don't really know how it works and how to run it. So I guess I know we lower our time preference and try to do things that benefit us in the future, but I know the seed oils thing, not that I advocate eating them or I don't eat a lot of them, at least from what I've looked into. I guess, does this take away from Bitcoin's message in the sense that you're looking into other things that aren't Bitcoin related? Or would you say that ties all into it, that you're kind of always, now you have your best money, now it's kind of like spokes of a wheel, you're trying to look into better things for yourself?
Yeah, actually the point is exactly that. When people say Bitcoin is savings technology, that's what I always think of it as, in the sense that you should actually remove your IQ from being appropriated towards just saving money and time, right? Like, when they say Jesus saves, like, so does Satoshi, right? Like, it's save money. And once you have that mindset that you can just save your time, your money, and then immediately everything else starts to become more obvious. The money is actually not the point, right? The money is to get beyond it. The money is almost like it's almost like a feedback loop that you can get stuck in. And what we're saying with the alchemical approach to Bitcoin is that the seed oils are everything. The diet is everything. It's more important than the coins in the end, because your brain isn't worried about how to pay for your ridiculous, stupid mortgage. It's actually focused on your blood energy and what makes you happy and what will incentivize you to actually. So here's the thing, when we talk about UBI in the show, one of the realities is I think we're going to be able to take care of the whole world with far less people being productive. The tools of everyone are so greatly expanded now, and the leverage we all have to send a message or affect change is on such a great level that that to me makes it the most important piece of all of this, and the way we can share it. So I don't know if everyone is going to go down this path, but we have to take care of everyone, right? I don't know if everyone is going to be able to go down this path of following your energy, and because the truth is the only people who are going to be productive are going to be the ones who actually mean it and want to be productive and want to create things. You can't expect everyone, there's going to be happy lives other than that. I think, I believe so. I believe it's a golden era of luxurious lifestyles for everybody at a very affordable price. And by luxurious lifestyles, I mean you can afford to have kids and live somewhere and raise them and be happy and consume enough and eat healthy and all those things.
Yeah, definitely. And even to your point, you kind of see in WTF happened in 1971. I know many Bitcoiners, 2 Bitcoiners actually created the website, but it kind of explains all of that. And it goes into saying how the seed oils back again, that like how our ancestors ate compared to where we looked. I know even a lot of health experts or people that I would consider experts that say, look at how your great grandfather ate, and that's probably how you should eat, and you'll probably be much healthier. And it just goes to show.
And by the way, like I don't want to come here and sound like I'm a dietitian or anything either, right? Like this is for everyone to go and learn about themselves. I don't know anything. I can't prove seed oils are bad. I know what it did to me when I stopped taking them, right? I know just me, but maybe it's psychological. I don't know anything about it. I've read stuff. I am persuaded, and there's certainly confirmation bias going on because of the echo chamber that is Bitcoin, that is people who have gone down the rabbit hole. However, sounds legit to me, and I feel it. So again, it doesn't matter if it works for you and you're healthier and you have more energy and you're observing this sort of luck of the Irish thing, getting in the right place at the right time and being look, a lot of us in Bitcoin had to have that in the early days, right? It was like, okay, the only way out of this is to create a new financial system. It was like, okay, what are you doing on the weekends? I got free weekends, and that was crazy. And I think we're all still in that group right now, right? Like literally, our plan is to sink the U.S. dollar. Like that's our plan, or at least turn it into a UBI thing to make sure people have enough hamburgers.
Yeah. And to your point, wow, I just lost my train of thought. So I'll keep going with it. But the last thing of alchemy, I know Guy Swan, we just had him on yesterday, and it was a really good segment. And we wish we could have went on for hours to ask him about stuff. I know I was listening to Bitcoin Audible, the podcast that he runs, and he was talking about Nikola Tesla in one of the episodes. He was talking about renewable energy.
Alchemist.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this ties exactly in. So Nikola Tesla, before he died, obviously he was kind of the rival or adversary to Edison. Edison's system ended up winning out in the end because he found a way to monetize electricity. But Nikola Tesla, I don't have as much to confirm, but I've definitely started digging into this, that that not that the CIA, but that there was people going against Nikola Tesla when he's saying, I know free and unlimited energy for the whole world that could provide for the whole world. And obviously, if you're a businessman running a business in, oil or gas or whatever it may be, if someone's saying that there's free energy in abundance for everyone, in monopolistic mentality or theory, you'd want to take this guy out. Maybe not literally kill him, but stop information from propagating. Unfortunately, when he died, it's kind of leery that his lab was raided. I don't know if it was CIA, FBI, whatever. It seems like a government agency went in there and took stuff. And he said that he had things in his mind. But whenever I YouTube or Google or DuckDuckGo or use all these platforms, it's very hard to find if he ever reached a conclusion or if it was just in his mind or maybe he was going crazy. I really don't know. But it would be amazing. And Guy Swan's final theory was, if there was free and abundant energy, what a perfect source for Bitcoin miners to plug into, whatever that source is, so they can generate Bitcoin. And they've reached the 0 point of no cost aside from the device.
Yeah, I've been thinking about the energy through the air thing for a long time. I think it's possible. one issue I think happens, and I'm not a physicist, but I believe it would affect our ability to use broadcast signals. So the extent to which we broadcast information over, various channels would be somewhat limited, I think, if we filled it all with the actual electricity that we can take out of the air. So I think it means, I've always interpreted it as maybe not free energy the way we're used to consuming. So Tesla's major malfunction in the future is that he never imagined a microprocessor. He never imagined that you could do all of these little things in one place. He knew on and off and frequencies. You know the story of how he invented the radio? It's one of the most amazing things you'll ever hear.
I actually don't know.
So he invented the radio. This is what it was. His mother was his main progenitor. He was more in common with his mother than his father. His mother was she could do little sewing things and really good with her fingers and really nimble and creative. The dad wanted him to be a religious priest in the Orthodox Church. And he was on his deathbed, sick with a mysterious illness, until his father said, you don't have to go to this school and you can follow what your mother says is good about you. So all this, I just need to create the mother backstory. He right away moves to America, digs a ditch for Edison, gets a job on Edison's yard. His first job is working on Edison's yard, right? The simulation is very, very funny. And it didn't treat him well and all this stuff. But anyway, he ends up having a couple of crazy hysterical dreams, right? The first one is he saw a picture of Niagara Falls, one of the first pictures, taken. And he went into hysterical dreams about putting a wheel in it, which is really where his first power station was. It was in Niagara Falls. He ended up building the thing he had a dream about when he was a kid. And his mother had always sort of told him to pursue that. The radio invention happens years later. The night his mother died, she came to him in a dream. And he woke up and went, I know, my mother and I are on the same frequency. That's how we do radio broadcasting. You shoot a frequency and you have a tuner. And that there's all these frequencies. There's infinite frequencies. And all you have to do is have a tuner and you can actually catch it. And that is how the radio was invented. He literally, and it was the exact, he had no clue his mother was gone. Came to in a dream. He woke up and said, this is how you build a radio. Tuner, antenna, frequencies aligned, you can communicate over the air. And there's a really amazing show that you should watch sometime by Ken Burns, who's a great American documentary filmmaker. And one of his first ever, it's called Empire of the Air. And it's about what amounts to the wars around DC, AC, and then radio after. And it's got a beautiful poster of an angel coming down from the clouds and touching the electrical and phone lines, and putting the spark into them so that all this communication begins in New York City. But yeah, Tesla, I don't know. I know he had the radio tower he built to create a weapon out of it in both Colorado and on Long Island. Apparently it worked, and apparently he hid after, and didn't create any more weapons. I mean, didn't hide, but didn't create. But go back to the alchemy piece. You think Pete Davidson is crazy with the branding. You know what he might have done? The whole thing.
Oh, wait, yeah, I do know this actually.
Don't know, but apparently because he was frustrated as he got older, along the same lines as what's his name, Newton, who apparently never touched anyone in his life physically, right, as a man would, and apparently because the answers weren't coming to him as easily any longer. One of the best frames to understand genius is the beached whale. A beached whale's energy that makes it so great at sea when it's alive, when it hits the shoreline, kills it. And you saw it with Michael Jackson, right? You see it a lot, right? You see it a lot out there. People who had all this ability and everything that made them great will destroy them in the end. And it doesn't happen to everyone, but Tesla became so obsessed with this stuff that in his later life, he was so, what's the word again, when you don't have sex?
Asexual.
Abstinent.
Yeah, abstinent. So abstinent that apparently he went one step further to make sure, so that he could work. Yeah.
That's
old man when he did that, though. Old man. No, that was not in youth. That was not in youth.
Yeah, I mean,
and just a rumor. I have no idea.
your story about the radio. I mean, we have iPhones and we're talking together on a virtual computer or through the internet, and that still sounds like alchemy and insanity.
Yeah, when I look at some of his research, I see the frustration. I see the frustration of not understanding the microprocessor revolution, and that your individual switches in an electrical unit could actually be instantly on a chip, triggered on and off binary 1-0s at a, not infinite, but an incredibly complex rate. I think he saw the world as like you need a refrigerator and a reading light. I don't think he understood that, transistor radios, and maybe he did. I don't know. I can't, his mind is, but like Steve Jobs, Steve Jobs was drawing the iPad and the iPhone on napkins in the 1980s. Just draw a square, right? With one button. And he used to tell me, that's what I'm making. That's actually what I'm building. When people say, oh, I love the new Mac, the iMac, oh, so Macintosh. No, I'm building this thing. And people would say, what the fuck is it? You drew a square, No, that's it, right? That's what I'm building. And he sort of knew it his whole life. And funny, like a lot of people, once the thing is over, life changes. And it might have happened to what's his name. You only get so many genius things, you don't get to make unlimited energy for everyone and the radio and electricity, power stations in general. But maybe, I'd say you'd have to ask Elon Musk or someone who would know more about that cutting edge piece. But definitely an alchemist, 100% an alchemist, 150%.
Yeah, I'm reading Amazon Unbound, and there was a napkin drawing in the book of what Jeff Bezos thought of the Amazon Echo, and it looks ridiculous. It's like this weird wonky box with a speaker and microphones. Literally, Jeff Bezos wrote this, and it's in there, documented in there. It's so funny, and then to see what it is now. I mean, they don't look comparable, but what he drew is the Amazon Echo or the Amazon Echo Dot or whatever it is.
I don't use any of them, man.
I don't use
Siri is not welcome at my house, and I mistreat all of these robot voices. I'm so rude to them. It's so much fun.
There's actually him when it wasn't working. He said some pretty heinous things to the devices itself, which is funny. And I'll leave one last thing. The line between genius and insanity is a very thin line. And sometimes you're on the insanity side when you are a genius. And I've seen it, just look in history, and it's insane.
Well, I mean, that's what this sort of luck of the Irish Druidic tradition sort of says, is that you don't really get to pick. If you really listen to your blood or whatever it is, you end up in a place that maybe you don't understand the implications, but seems to have some cosmic significance, or maybe not. Maybe we're all just living in a simulation.
You got to get more weed in my system before we dive down the rabbit hole of, are we in a simulation or not? But if you do want to smoke some weed with us, come to the Bitcoin conference, use code YTMAG, get 10% off. You know the drill. If you see me and I'm not stressed, crazy working, I'll roll one up and we'll enjoy it. And we'll convince Nolan to tell us all his theories about the simulation we are living in. We're going to cut to a quick commercial break, and then we are going to be joined by Bitcoin Magazine's resident boomer. So stick around. You're not going to want to miss this. Hot mic here. Get your hot mic. What is up, guys? Welcome back. We are joined by Bitcoin Magazine's resident boomer and the man who actually orange pilled his kids, not the other way around, Mark Mariah. Mark, how you doing?
Hey, Q. Thanks for having me. Good to see you.
And it's always great getting to connect and chat with you. As we mentioned, you are sort of the elder statesman here. I'm going to keep rubbing it in a little bit. So
absolutely.
Feel free to tell me to go F
No, you're spot on. I feel like an old timer.
Well,
I still think I'm your age, but I know I'm not because you guys keep reminding me.
I guess that's why we get along, because I think I'm your age. So
there we go. An old soul. I love it. I love it.
So, Mark, I want to talk to you a little bit about like what goes on in the boomer world in regards to Bitcoin. I guess your generation, I like to blame for essentially causing 99% of the problems that my generation has to deal with. And I'll just start in a very easy place. The banks, they take advantage of us. The fees that I have to pay sometimes are absolutely bonkers and insane. Just the other day, I went to go deposit a check and they told me that the money won't show up in my account for 24 hours. It's as though, I don't know, some software that will confirm transactions every 10 minutes would be far more efficient than the current banking system. But Talk to me a little bit about how your generation got involved in banking, how you were convinced to get involved in the current banking system.
Yeah, I mean, I think I said this when I did the podcast with Casey that I was a banking lawyer, but it's interesting. There's a group of boomers. Most of them actually don't trust cryptocurrencies. But I think, as much as we want to blame it on boomers, remember, we didn't really design the system. We inherited it. We stewarded it really crappy, right? And so, but I think the real problem is that the banking system is so much worse and more unfair than people realize. That's part A to the problem of why boomers and other people don't get it. And then part B, Bitcoin's 200 times better than any human being can even conceive of. So those two create a huge delta. If this is neutral and you got 200 standard deviations with Bitcoin and you got 200 standard deviations with the dollar, you got a problem. So we talked originally about talking about the fact that the money in your bank ain't yours, which I think is a really good illustration. And you kind of, sounds like you experienced it when you went to deposit a check and you want to be able to access those funds immediately. What I find with boomers is some of them are so terrified of it, and it doesn't really make any sense other than it's like a blanket that you've given to a 3-month-old or a 3-year-old and they don't want to let go of it because it doesn't make sense. I actually have a friend who hates using the word fiat. Go figure.
What is the reasoning for that?
He didn't have one and I didn't press.
And I'm assuming though he is saying like I don't care for this word from the lens of like I align with this ideology.
Correct. I mean, he's in the mortgage. He's in the mortgage business, so he's helping people get loans and buy houses. So he's as tied to the people at the money printer as you're going to get. So it makes a certain amount of sense. What's interesting though, he's coming around because when I first had that conversation with him, which was probably 6 months ago. A lot has happened, as we all know, and he's seeing it just as clearly as everyone else. But I think what I find with boomers is that most of them, what I'll usually say to them, particularly if they're affluent, yeah, you probably don't need Bitcoin. And I say that not really because it's true, but because if you tell someone they should do something, the normal human reaction is, the heck with you, I'll prove you wrong. So it's,
well, let's unpack that, because I know that you and I talked about the fact that like you have orange pilled your kids,
right?
And that's not like the first time we've heard that. When Jack Mallers was on this show, he even admitted that it was his father,
his dad,
who got him into Bitcoin as well. And thank you, Mr. Mallers, for that.
No kidding.
Talk to us though. Like, look, if my dad tells me to do something at a certain point in my life, it was I'm going to do the exact opposite. I think now I've understood the rhyme or reason to most of what he tells me. What was that conversation like with your kids?
Yeah, they'll probably kill me. It was actually pretty good. And you're absolutely right, Q. Most people, myself included, right? If my parents wanted me to do it, well, I would do the opposite just to make the point. The way I had that conversation, my daughter had started a business. She actually had started a flower shop in 2019. She's, by the way, I hope you get to meet her. She's coming to Bitcoin 2022, she and her partner. I really want to meet you and the rest of the team. This will be awesome. Chris and Alex. But when I sat down with her, and I have in my basement, I have literally 30 feet of like whiteboard. And I said, Jen, here's the situation. We sold your grandparents' house in Florida. We've got some money. And I kind of did some math using the Michael Saylor K-graph of how much money was losing its purchasing power. Literally, I wrote it out on the board and I said, so in 3 years, this number is now going to be worth quite a bit less. I said, and if instead we put something into Bitcoin and we assume conservatively, I mean, it's been doing 150% or more a year, but let's just assume it only, I think I did 50%. It only does 50%. Here's what we have. And so it was interesting. During the meeting, she said to me, well, I don't really know how to, set up an account. And my daughter's so tech savvy that sounded like a horrible reason. And before the next hour of the meeting was done, because it wasn't just to talk about Bitcoin, she's like, she reports to me, Dad, I opened an account and I bought, $2,000 worth of Bitcoin or whatever she bought. I forget what she bought, but this is in November of, 2020. So it was very much clear to people that we were on a money printing rampage, and she understood it pretty quickly. So she actually did it the first moment I suggested it. Now, the irony is I didn't actually want her to buy Bitcoin. I wanted her opinion of whether or not I should take these funds that were sitting in the bank and put them in Bitcoin. So it's like, well, what about me? Right? What about me? But it was cute. And then my son came in to the same meeting a little bit later. He did the same thing. So it was relatively easy. On matters of money, both of them are pretty savvy. I don't think I could have convinced them if they didn't see the value of it.
Fair. Well, let's talk a little bit about, trying to convince your friends and people, right, your peers, essentially, the value of it. Many people your age have sort of benefited from the fiat system. They don't see a rhyme or reason to change the way they handle things. Why should they?
Well, we know the unfairness of the system. I actually think that recent events in Canada have made more of them very aware. I think the events of what's going on with the US dollar, or the US government essentially cutting the feet out from underneath the Russian ruble and the Russian people. I think these are getting people's attention. I think inflation's getting their attention. What I find with at least my peer group is, rather than try and convince them of it, I literally will say, hey, I'll find a reason. I've got a friend, they've got a birthday. I'll say, download, in my case, a Moon wallet. I want to give you some Bitcoin for your birthday. So literally they download it and I send them the Bitcoin so fast, contrary to your, I don't know if we're talking about 4 or not, you couldn't get your check cleared. They were blown away by how easy and quickly they just did a transaction in Bitcoin. So forget all the theory. Do I know how this computer works right now? Have absolutely no clue. Do I have any idea how my phone works? I have absolutely no clue. I'm not even a very tech-oriented person, right? I know enough to be able to figure out how to do, podcasts. But the reality is, and that's true with a lot of boomers, literally there are some boomers, they barely know how to turn on a computer. So when you've got someone with that little sophistication, but they know how to use their phone, you cut through all of that silliness. And what I do is I'm trying to get as many people off zero as I can. And I don't care if they have 10 Satoshis. Once they actually have the ability to transact in it, if some proverbial what hits the fan, I want literally everybody around me to be able to know how to get on the lifeboat, even if they don't really understand that there's a 21 million supply hard cap, that there's, every 10 minutes, it verifies the transactions going all the way back to the Genesis block in January of 2009. They don't need to understand all that to be able to transact. And I find with most of the friends that I've done this with, It's been very persuasive. And more often than not, they're like, okay, can you now show me how to buy some Bitcoin? Because you can't do that very, that I know of, at least with the Moon wallet.
Yeah. And Mark,
go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And I know when we were at the All Hands in January, when Bitcoin Magazine all meet up and we got to see each other in meet space, as we call it, we were at a restaurant. Mark and I were sitting next to each other, and the two bartenders were asking like, oh, what's Bitcoin? They had heard of it, but they didn't really know what it was. And we did that exact experiment. I'm trying to get it down to, I can do it in less than 2 minutes with download time and everything. Like download Moon Wallet, MUUN. They download it, they open it up, a lightning channel. I have something on my wallet and I send it to them. I'm trying to get that down quicker and quicker. I was actually trying to orange pill a friend of a friend kind of thing. We were together.
Yep.
And I believe it was for the Super Bowl. But anyway, I was talking to him. And of course, when I go to do it, I had him download a Moon wallet. There was like, it said transaction in pending progress or something like that. I was like, of course, it's not working right now.
Well, of course, it's the Super Bowl. You got like 3 million people doing the same thing at the same time. Yeah.
So, and that's what I said. I was like, oh, the Lightning Network's like bogged down. There's a lot of crypto commercials or Bitcoin commercials going on. That's why it's taken a while. So I kept talking to him because he wanted to learn more. And by after 2 minutes more, he looks down at his phone and he had already received it. So instead of being 2 minutes, it took 4 minutes, which is still pretty incredible when a bearer asset. I think a thing that's interesting though, that you mentioned was that like, it's a lifeboat and you're trying to get everyone on. I heard this argument on a podcast. I forget which one, but they're saying that like, is there a possibility that there's not enough lifeboats for people to get on? And that's something that I had never thought about. Like, oh, Bitcoin, we know there's a 21 million supply cap, but like realistically, the amount that are lost, the amount that can only be sold, the amount that are remaining supply, are there enough lifeboats for everyone to get on? And it's something I had never thought because I do have Bitcoin myself. Go ahead, Mark, if you want to.
Yeah, I mean, I thought a lot about that, Q. I'd like to get your thoughts too. But to me, there's 2.1 quadrillion Satoshis. So, immediately, there is always the possibility that, the price is going to run on us as it becomes the only functioning monetary system in the world. I would argue that it right now is the only fully functioning uncensorable monetary system on planet Earth right now. Right? In other words, you nor myself nor Q can go somewhere and say, okay, shut it down. It cannot be done. There's literally not another monetary system in the world like that. So, that might happen, but to me, that's like step 17. I'm still trying to get people on step 1. Q.
Yes and no. Yes, you can't shut down Bitcoin.
Okay.
But no, you can shut down access points of Bitcoin.
Absolutely.
You can shut down, like, you want to get real aggressive and like what World War III is really going to look like. It's going to be shutting down your internet access, shutting down your access to energy. And if you don't have energy and you don't have internet, you don't have Bitcoin.
I got bigger problems at that point as well.
Absolutely.
But
that's always the first thing that anyone's like, well, what happens when the internet gets shut down? I'm like,
right.
And how much cash do you really have under your bed? Like, we use credit cards 99% of the time anyways.
Well, and that's one of the stories I wanted to share with you. So I have another friend who's a boomer. April of 2020, our theme was going to be, hey, look, the money in your bank ain't yours. And she learned this lesson 2 years ago. I was talking to her recently. She says, I went to the bank, said, look, I'd like to get out $2,000. And they're like, I'm sorry, ma'am, we can only give you 200. And she's like speechless. Then she's like apoplectic. She's pissed. And she's like, I cannot believe it. It's like, and that's what she learned. Look, it's not your money. As we all know, as Bitcoiners, what we learn is if you have Bitcoin on an exchange, you don't have Bitcoin, you have an IOU for Bitcoin. But what most Americans don't know, most boomers don't know, but all of us don't know is the dollars in your bank are an IOU. They are not yours and legally they're not even yours. So the way they handle it on the balance sheet, not to get too technical, they're listing it as an asset on their balance sheet. And it's a liability their liability is to us, but it's an IOU. And so she learned that she couldn't take out the amount of money that she wanted as a cushion in what I would argue is a pretty very, very uncertain time, certainly April of 2020. And she eventually closed that bank and found another one. I think it was a credit union, which, by the way, for those of you who do want to hold money in the banking system, you're way better off with a credit union than you are with usually the big banks for a whole bunch of reasons I won't bore you with. But
just remember, this is advice coming from someone who's very much in tune with the banking system. So I would not be ignoring some of this knowledge.
Well, I'm in tune with it, but I will also, full disclosure, the funny part of my whole Bitcoin journey was I have not trusted the banking system since 2008, because it was very obvious to me the system was on the verge of collapsing, and all they did was save essentially the first class passengers on the boat, right? Using a Titanic metaphor. And that just strikes me. And even if I might be considered by some, because I work with lawyers a lot, to be sort of in that category, that strikes me as so fundamentally unfair that I understand the banking system. And as I said to you earlier, it's 200 times worse than anyone thinks. But understanding and knowing what the banking system is like, I think is almost required for everybody in the world anymore. And as bad as the United States is, if you listen, I had an interview with Ray Youssef. I'm hoping to do an article for Bitcoin Magazine coming out before the conference. He's going to speak at the conference, but he says that there are 2,000 different payment systems in Africa, and only 3% of them talk to each other. So when you get, and he calls it financial apartheid. Well, financial apartheid in Africa is way worse than the United States, but make no mistake about it, there's financial apartheid in the United States just as much as there is Africa. It just isn't as extreme. And in Canada, back to your point, Q or Chris, I forget who you were mentioning. To me, watching what they did in Canada, mere money is not safe. If the government, I think Q, you said it, whether it shut down the energy grid, whether it's shut down your access to the internet, one way or the other, if they want to control you, they can control you. And it's really the reason why I feel strongly, as do I think most Bitcoiners, we need to separate money from state control, because they've proven to us they can't be trusted. And they're giving us literally daily news now since February, reinforcing that point. So we don't sound like a bunch of crazy Bitcoiners. They're like, the rest of the world, including my friends, are going, yeah, that is a little weird. They're not as alarmed yet as we are, but they haven't thought about the implications.
Totally. So, I mean, look, to actually go back and give you my response to what Chris was presenting earlier, I believe the number is somewhere around 250,000 Satoshis if it was evenly distributed across 8 billion people in the world. Okay. I don't think that's realistic. I don't think everyone in the world will have Bitcoin.
It'll never be that way. Yeah.
What I do think is more likely, and this may not sit well with many people. We actually are watching, and I'm not going to try to say exactly, but there's an announcement from Tether saying that they are about to, or they have purchased something to the tune of 8 million, I believe it was, $1 million worth of Bitcoin to hold on reserve. I think scenarios like that, where you have stable coins having some sort of Bitcoin backing, or what I think is more realistic is stable coins actually being built on top of Lightning. And you have new chains introduced where US dollar coin backed by Bitcoin, Euro coin backed by Bitcoin. I think that is a much more realistic endeavor. You ultimately return to a degree to a fiat standard by doing something like that. And I think that's where I think people become uneasy hearing something like that.
Yeah.
But I think that is a much simpler way to democratize the distribution of Bitcoin.
I would agree with that. And I have wondered, even since as early as November of 2020, why there weren't more companies trying to essentially use a stable coin in making sure you have enough Bitcoin, because Bitcoin's very volatile, but it's volatile to the upside. The beauty of the stable coin is it's very stable. So if the person wants to hold their assets in stable coins, they're much more familiar with that. The problem with causing radical behavior change is that people get really, really nervous. And as soon as they get really nervous and fearful, we've been living in 2 years worth of nonstop fear. They're going to run away from it pathologically. So I think your idea is a great one, Q. And I don't know enough about Tether, right? The only coin I know about is Bitcoin. I know about Tether only from what I read. I haven't studied it, but to me, that makes business sense, because there's another thing that we haven't talked about, Bitcoin, that doesn't get enough press. It is the world's most pristine collateral on planet Earth. Now, I say that as a former banking lawyer who used to do work for the bank where they would give a loan, and then they'd have a security interest in property to guarantee that they would have something to collect against if the person who gave them, they loaned the money to, didn't pay them. They could repossess it. Well, Bitcoin is the world's most pristine collateral, and I don't think the world has figured that out. I think your idea is a really good one. I think eventually most stable coins, one way or the other, are going to want to have Bitcoin on their balance sheet. And to me, that's a smart business move that I don't care if you like the alternate coins or not. That's just a really smart business move. And that was the other thing. So the money's not yours. Michael Saylor found that out the hard way when his company, MicroStrategy, this is before Bitcoin. You probably know the story, right? He actually had $1 million in Argentina. And because he was a US company, he was able to hold it at a US bank in US dollars. Then all of a sudden they closed the bank. 2 days later, they reopened and they converted all of those US dollar held accounts into pesos, and whoosh, his buying power just dropped by 90%, almost overnight. That is a corporate entity that found that out many years before Bitcoin, I think, was actually even invented. Those kinds of stories, you can find them all over the place. That's why I say the banking system is 200 times worse than most of us realize. And if we just did a little bit of research, we'd start to understand what that means to us as citizens.
Yeah, Mark, I think those are great points. And especially when you've got likes of Michael Saylor and Fidelity now saying Bitcoin is pristine collateral. It's not just you, me, and Q just like doing a little powwow saying it. It's like these are, big financial institutions that carry a lot of weight in the markets. If I'm on the street corner yelling to buy Bitcoin, I'm just the crazy guy in the room that works for Bitcoin Magazine. I think it's also another great point too, that like Saylor was burned in the Argentina story, and it's a great story. And I understand that. I know he's technically fighting. I won't say he's fighting regulators, but he's trying to change the gap accounting rules.
Yep.
So not to bore people with the details, but the long story short is that when Bitcoin's on MicroStrategy's balance sheet, if Bitcoin goes below the average of when they buy it, they have to write it off as a loss on their balance sheet. And that obviously affects
on their income statement.
On their income statement.
They have to write down the dip in value, and they have to write it off on their income statement.
Yes. Thank you for correcting me. They have to write it down on their income statement. But on the other side, if it rips in price, they don't get to have the price appreciation. Unfortunately, it's just written down to that new value.
Exactly. All really negative, no positive. Hey, but I'm sure the financial system is trying to be very fair to Bitcoin, and that is one that I think. There's a lot of things that once they change, they'll make a difference in Bitcoin. That's one. You'll see a lot more corporations putting on their balance sheet. I have, along with my co-authors, Colin Crossman and Heidi Porter, we've written some articles for essentially small and medium-sized businesses. And in there, we're trying to explain to them sort of why small and medium-sized companies ought to have it on their balance sheet. And they don't have to worry about the same public company rules that you just mentioned, Chris. There's obviously a lot of reasons that we can see. We're obviously in this a lot. But there are some structural changes that need to happen, including, even though if people hate ETFs, putting an ETF that's a spot ETF out into the world is going to dramatically change how much capital is allocated by institutions. There's a bunch of changes that are coming. Meanwhile, we have to use these rickety old. So I think of it as sort of these rickety old. Think of it as railroad tracks that are made from wood. They're not even made from metal. And they're fraying, they're not working very well. They certainly don't work fairly for everybody like Bitcoin does. And I think more and more people one at a time are starting to realize that their confidence in how they've constructed or perceived the world isn't what they thought. And the banking system in particular happens to be one that gets very personal very fast when you can't get access to your money.
Yeah, and to your point as well, as of right now, Michael Saylor and MicroStrategy don't hold their own keys. They use a custodial through Coinbase. And along with the regulations that we're talking about, another thing that's holding him back that I found out just looking at MicroStrategy's balance sheet and how it's structured and stuff, there's a line in there for, I guess, digital assets or cryptocurrencies. Basically, they have to have a way to audit the supply, and it can't be in their own wallet. It has to be through, because like there's some legal reason that a custodial needs to have it to verify it. So in theory, every quarter, like MicroStrategy might have to move billion or 4.1 billion or whatever the worth of it is right now into Coinbase and then move it back into their 7 of 10
into their multi-sig.
Into their multi-sig. So I know part of it was that right now the standards require that it be audited every quarter before they do it to make sure that's actually there. And I think that's part of the other thing that Michael Saylor hasn't moved it out into a self-hosted multi-sig with him and his shareholders or whatever it may be. If you want to expand on that.
Well, I hadn't heard that, and I'm immediately thinking about if they had to do that every quarter, it would be a lot easier to figure out the address for the MicroStrategy stack if they were doing it that way. So I cannot really comment one way or the other. I do know about custodians. Again, I was both a securities lawyer at one point in my life where almost everything is held. If you own stock, it's rare anymore you actually hold the physical certificate. Used to be very common, but no more. And so the custodians own it. And this is a story again. So again, I don't know about specifically MicroStrategy and being able to put it in there. What I love about Bitcoin is it is going to create a level of transparency in the banking system or in the financial system, not in our banking system, like Kraken just did proof of reserves. And I think that is a really, really valuable thing to be able to do. And literally, there's nothing in the US banking system that can do that, nor will there ever be a CBDC that allows us to do that either. I think of CBDCs, I call them surveillance coins. It's astonishing to me that anybody in America wants to even consider them. But I do understand when you start giving out money with no strings or seemingly no strings, people get attracted to it real quickly.
Q, if there's anything you want to add, hop in here.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fascinating that we are at this weird culmination point. We have to break what we have thought and been taught over the years. We have a generation who your generation, to put it frankly, is not incentivized to see this switch. If anything,
you're correct.
Stand to lose more from watching this switch happen while you guys are a part of this system. Beyond obviously the idea or notion that like we're doing this to make the world better for our kids or our grandkids and so on. What are other things that can or do motivate boomers that you have in conversations with them found?
What's interesting, what I look for is curiosity, Q. So, and I've got a bunch of friends. It's like anything I send them, they read, and I can bury them with a lot of information if I want to. I tend not. They have to, you used the phrase, I don't know if you knew it or not, you used the phrase that's relevant. You have to unlearn your old ideas about money. You have to unlearn your old ideas about the banking system. And I don't want to, we've already dumped enough probably in the last 2 years on our education system, but there's literally nothing in our educational system that teaches people about money, that teaches people about the banking system, that teaches them how it works. And so what you'll find more often than not is that, like my friend who went to the bank in April of 2020 and wanted to get out 2,000 in cash and can only get 200, those are the people, it doesn't matter how old they are, they're very open to hearing what you have to say. And I will usually try to make it sound, look, in fact, one of the things I actually make a point of doing when they download the Moon Wallet and I send them some Bitcoin is I'll say, welcome to the peaceful revolution. Because it really is a revolutionary way of holding value. And again, remember, Bitcoin isn't just a value transfer network. It's an energy transfer network. And I think Michael Saylor does the best job of explaining it. And whether you agree with him or not, that there's something called monetary energy, I find that at least my peers, some of them who are engineers, I can actually talk sort of Michael Saylor language and they get it. But it's a constant experiment, because for the most part, if they already own their own home, they have 2 or 3 rentals, they're not necessarily hugely motivated. But ironically enough, Q, one of my neighbors is in exactly that situation. And I actually convinced her in the early days of Bitcoin. I was trying to convince people. I've stopped trying to convince anybody. All right. I want them on the lifeboat, but I'm not going to try and convince you. I don't need to do that. It's not important. But her, back then, I was trying to convince her. And one of the things I said to her is, all right, well, I just funded, I have an HOA. I actually have 3 HOAs, sadly, because of where I sit. All right. They add up to like $500 a month. And then I have taxes. And I said to her, hey, I just funded my taxes, up front by buying Bitcoin. It'll probably cover me for the next 3 years. And her eyes got big as saucers, because if you assume the growth rate on Bitcoin is going to be what it's been, over the last 10 years, there's a really, really good chance that I'm holding the purchasing power of paying for my HOA dues and my taxes by holding Bitcoin. It's essentially putting Bitcoin in your balance sheet. You don't say it that way, right? You'd say that to a business person. You wouldn't necessarily say that to a real estate person who actually owns not just the one property where I live, but also a property, 2 or 3 other properties within, 10 miles of here. So it's, every person's different. And what I'm looking for, as I said, is I'm looking for curiosity, or in some cases, disgust with the current system. And there's actually a lot of people who have a lot of disgust with the current system.
I know.
And those are my 2 kind of approaches, really. And I would think same thing with you guys, right, Chris?
I would agree. They sound like very revolutionary ideas. And with revolutionary ideas, there's revolutionary doctrines. I know that you've kind of been the one to.
Chris, I think you froze for a moment.
He broke up. I think he was going to go into, and I'm glad he did.
Do it.
Yeah.
Yes.
So back in June of last year, I wrote a first draft of something we now call the Declaration of Monetary Independence. And Bitcoin Magazine, some of the co-authors and I wrote this thing last summer. We had it published in October 31st of last year, very intentionally. And Chris, I think you were going to say, we are having as an experience at Bitcoin 2022, a 9-foot by 12-foot version of the Declaration of Monetary Independence. And any people who are attending this year's conference in Miami are invited to come and sign it. And there's going to be like 4 or 5 feet of blank space, 12 feet long for people to sign. So I'm hoping we can get Bukele or Lummis, some very well-known people, to sign it, but I don't care. The name of the game is how many thousands of signatures can we get on this thing? Because I think, at least in our view, it's probably the most important gathering of people in Miami from April 6th to April 9th since 1776. That's how important, at least I perceive it, and I think a fair number of people, for all the reasons I think Chris was going to say, which is we need to separate money from state control, or we're going to continue to have these problems. Is that where you were going with that, Chris?
Yeah, my MacBook just happened to reset right when I did that.
Perfect.
So, yeah.
Well, it's okay, because I just explained to people we're doing the 9 by 12, and I don't know if you guys can see it. It's sitting there. There's 2 versions actually. One under my Villanova thing is the actual replica. It's a 2 by 3 foot version of the declaration that those of people who come to the conference can buy their own version of it. And in fact, if there's a way to do it easily and you want one lucky listener to get a copy, I'll mail it to them. I need their address, but happy to give one away. But those are going to be actually for sale in the Bitcoin conference store for those people who want a memento. And it's obviously very unusual. When's the last time you attended a conference where you actually signed something that had some kind of historical significance, particularly given what's happened in Canada and what's happening right now on the global scene between the United States and Russia? So yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. I'm super stoked about that.
Yeah, I brought it up and I'm dropping them in the chat now. Q, if you have anything else you want to add while I do that.
In fact, for sure, I want to figure out if we can figure a time, maybe before the conference starts, where we can get all the folks from BTC Media to actually come sign it, make it a bit of an event for people that want to come to it. But I'm hoping it'll be in the lobby of the open source stage. So it'll be quite a ways away from where the store is, but it'll be by one of the stages. So inviting any and all folks who are coming to Bitcoin 2022 to come and sign it. I think it'll be really fun, and it'll hopefully be thousands of signatures on there. And we're also going to leave an opportunity. There'll be no charge to sign it, but for those people who want to make a voluntary donation, we will have I think a QR code there, and you'll be able to donate money or Bitcoin to opensats.org, which is obviously going to benefit the BitDevs. So I'm looking forward to that, seeing how that works out as an experience. I'm excited about it.
Well, beyond just, signing the Declaration of Monetary Independence and, broadcasting and giving it its sort of introduction to the world at the conference, is there anything else that you're really excited for down in Miami? We're just 20 days out now.
I'm glad you asked. Actually, that is one that I am super stoked about. But there is another one, and I just sort of finalized it, and I've posted it. I'll start posting it in sort of the group chats I'm in Telegram. So last year, myself and another person who's now with Bitcoin Magazine, Eric, helped put on something we called the Soul of Bitcoin. And the speaker last year was Robert Breedlove. Well, we have just finished the details, and Robert is having a surprise guest that I am certain you guys would love if you come. And we're doing that on Friday night, and it has just been finalized. It's going to be at the Fontainebleau. So I'll probably I'll be working there as well, and being part of that event. But we're also going to have JP Sears, who until like 2 days ago, I'd never seen, or I didn't know that was who it was. I think I'd seen him before. He's like the opening comedy act for this thing that's going to happen on Friday at the Soul of Bitcoin event. So I'm very excited about watching a live studio, watch in front of a live audience, an interview that Robert does with his special or surprise guest, and then actually seeing JP Sears live, because he's hilarious. So there's a bunch of stuff. What are you guys excited about? What has you most enamored? Q. And then Chris.
I am just excited to actually get to meet a lot of these people in person. Yeah. There were some that I did get to meet last year, and it was a really interesting experience as a pleb who has no part in Bitcoin, but to be able to go there as a member of Bitcoin Magazine and sort of wave that flag very proudly. And, we are cooking up some really exciting stuff as well for those of you who aren't going to be able to attend the conference in person. You're going to have your own unique experience, but nothing is going to beat being there in person. And if you have not bought a ticket, but this conversation is what finally convinced you, use code YTMAG and get 10% off your conference tickets.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm looking forward to seeing a lot of folks that I've only met, obviously, from either in Telegram or whatever. Chris, how about you?
Yeah, I've said it earlier in the episode, but I'm really looking forward to the Impervious browser. It's basically a browser that's built on Bitcoin. They call it many things, Google without Google, Zoom without Zoom, Dropbox without Dropbox. So I hope I'm not disappointed, but I know a couple of developers there and I'm really excited for it. I'm also looking forward to Seed Signer, the device. I saw it at the TAB conference. And it was kind of one of those things that I got to talk to Keith and Seed Signer himself, and they were showing me the device. I'm like, this is so cool. And then I went and did other things. And then by the time I came back, they were cleaning up and I felt awkward asking them to get their stuff out. So I want to buy one from them to support them. And then of course, meeting all the plebs in Meat Space, you can't go wrong doing that. It's my first time going to the Bitcoin conference. I was at the TAB conference, like I said, but I'm looking forward to this one. It's bigger and better, even though Q and I are going to be busy as hell until Friday evening. I'm sure we will be at that event because our work will be at least.
Yeah, by then you'll be able to hopefully enjoy yourself a little bit because all you got left is the Sound Money Fest.
Exactly. Q and I will be wrapping up the stream and then doing that. Go ahead.
Not for you, Q.
Party so hard at Sound Money Fest, especially because I'm no longer going to Coachella. Like I'm gonna jam pack 3 days of Coachella partying in a 12-hour window on Saturday, April 9th.
Sweet. That's sweet.
My flight's not out till late Sunday evening, so I'll be doing the same thing on Saturday.
Well, and the other thing that I actually would like to let folks know about, I mean, contributors, I'm hoping to actually meet some of the contributors. So as you know, my role is sort of contributor liaison. I'm always looking for people that want to write for Bitcoin Magazine, whether it's in mining, it doesn't matter what it's about, opinions, but we have never met as a group that I know of in any organized fashion until hopefully Miami. We haven't picked the day yet, and I'll even invite obviously you guys, because I think it'd be really fun. You can meet some of the contributors if you want, but that I think is for the same reasons you guys just mentioned. I'm hoping I can meet a bunch of the folks who've been great contributors to Bitcoin Magazine. They've been producing some content lately, and you guys too, by the way. I love, your Peter Diamandis one. That was awesome. He's an amazing guy. But no, so it's going to be an intense 4 days. And what I can't get over, again, I'm sort of the old fart. I cannot get over people come like 3 and 4 days early, right? And then last year, I was there for last year, where they had officially attending 12,000, and then another like 36 or 38,000 people who came to Miami. I'm guessing that same dynamic is going to happen again this year. So there'll be nonstop stuff going on, I'm sure, that whole week, right?
Oh, it's going to be jam-packed. Like I'm the type of person who I require sleep. I don't know how people who don't sleep a lot function. I just don't. I'm jealous of those type of people. Yeah. However, last year at Bitcoin 21, I think I slept a total of like 8 hours in the 3 days that I was there.
Oh my God.
So it was, I don't drink coffee. I don't do caffeine, but I was chugging coffee all day, every day. And again, that energy and the atmosphere of it all really wakes you up. But
it really is. It's intense. It was fun. It was a fun intensity.
Mark, I want to really quickly, if any of our viewers or any of our listeners are out there and they want to contribute to Bitcoin Magazine, can you maybe explain to them how they can get involved?
Absolutely. So there's a lot of people who write in this space, and back to our original topic, which is about banking. I think there are more folks your age and younger who understand the banking system better than anybody in my peer group. But for those folks who have either written great content, or you think you've got a great idea for an article or a really strong opinion, and it doesn't matter if the opinion's, for or against something, whether it's a wallet or whatever, by all means, reach out. You can actually reach me at mark@btcmedia.org. By all means, send me an email or find me on Telegram. I think I come up under Satoshi Shadow, but would love to hear from people. We are constantly getting new people and writers. And as I said to CK, before I even got involved in Bitcoin Magazine, you guys produce, and I include you guys in the video as well, but the magazine at the time was all I had read. They're producing some of the best content, period. It is astonishing to me. They're more thoughtful. They go into areas that are basically out of bounds for the mainstream and corporate press. They just can't go there, right? And so you're not going to actually see a balanced anything because they've already essentially taken out 99% of what they can talk about. So it's a completely useless exercise. So we're constantly in search and have talent. We've got writers from Iceland. We've got them from the UK. We've got them from Germany. We've got them from obviously every state in the country, I think, just about. And it's really a cool group because once you get in there and you've published your first article, and Q, if you haven't done one yet, I'm going to keep hounding you because I think we talked about this back in maybe we didn't talk about this in January when we were in the meeting in Nashville. It might have been Tommy. It was Tommy.
I wrote 2 articles since that meeting in Nashville.
You rock, man. Well, what I was going to say is we also have a group Telegram chat where we can have some really, really interesting conversations. For example, we just did one in the group on how to conference with a purpose, how to work, go into a room full of people and have a really clear idea and understanding of how to approach it in a way that makes you feel more natural and comfortable rather than awkward and out of place. So absolutely, thank you for that invitation. We would love to hear from anybody that thinks they have an article they've already written or one that they think they could write. I'm particularly interested in anybody, by the way, that really wants to hammer on how unbelievable Bitcoin mining is for the environment. Everybody usually when they write the article say, well, okay, well, it's not like ideal on the E. Wrong. It is the best freaking invention for our environment ever in the history of the planet. It is going to eventually revolutionize, I think, the way we handle waste and the fiat system. If it's one thing fiat's better at, way better at than Bitcoin, it's waste, right? It knows how to produce waste. We have waste energy. I don't know how many tens of thousands of waste stranded assets but Bitcoin starts to solve not only those problems. There's even a waste tire facility in North Carolina that I would love to find somebody to write an article about. And Chris, I see you shaking your head. It is phenomenal. They are basically breaking these tires down by heating them up and reducing them to elemental components. And they're selling every single one of those components. And they're eliminating an environmental problem. We have the same pile of tires in Colorado. It's about 30 minutes east of Denver. It's still there. It's getting larger. And if I have my druthers between now and the end of the year, we're going to set up one in Colorado. And it will be a waste to energy success story that literally I do not know of another or better solution to the problem than Bitcoin mining. So we'll see.
Yeah, there's one in North Carolina and it's run by Jason Williams. I think it's called PRTI or P.
Yep, PRTI.
Yep.
In fact,
PRTI.
if you guys have any connections to him or Chris Gare, is it? I forget what his name is, the CEO. Would love to talk to them about doing an article on that because what I'm a little surprised at.
Let's chat offline. We'll chat after the show wraps about that. We're in touch with Going Parabolic.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Well, guys, this has been a really fun OK Boomer segment. You guys have your call to action. If you want to write, if you have an idea, there are no bad ideas in Bitcoin. Mark is the guy that you guys should be talking to. I hope this was enjoyable. Thank you all who have been watching from the moment we started. Thank you all for sticking around. And I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Should we cut to commercial? Cool.
We're live.
What is up, fam? Thank you for sticking around. It's been a 3-segment filled day. Hope you guys have enjoyed and learned a ton. You know what I'm going to remind you about. We're 20 days out. I want to keep my job. Chris wants to keep his job. Use code YTMAG. Get 10% off so we can keep making this show for you guys on the other end of the conference. In the meantime, Boise State just blew it, and my bracket is looking uglier and uglier as these games go on. Chris, who do you have winning the tournament?
I have Baylor going all the way, dude.
Tough, especially when their best player is out injured.
Dude, I always pick them randomly. That's how I do it. I watch zero college basketball. I just do it all. No, this is the Kevin Ware story. They're gonna revolve around their guys, and they're gonna win it all that way. That dude blew out his knee, and then they won it all. This is how it's done. This is how dreams are made, buddy.
Look, I have no room to talk as someone who genuinely has like studied and used to like work for NBA teams as a basketball analytics scout. I've learned like statistics in college basketball that are actually more valuable. And I use that, like my understanding of that every year I do these brackets. I have never won since, or no, that's not true. I won, thank you, Anthony Davis, when Kentucky won with you way back when I was a freshman in college. But yeah, I mean, I picked South Dakota State to go to the Sweet 16, and yeah, that didn't work out. But fun fact, if you guys want to be keeping a close tab on our Twitters and seeing the battle that's going to ensue, our fellow co-host and leader, Alex McShane, has Iowa winning the entire tournament. I, however, have Richmond, their first round matchup, beating them. So this will be really fun. My bracket is either going to completely implode or Alex's will. So stick around while I troll him on Twitter for the rest of the day.
Yep.
All righty, guys. Have a good one. And as always, stack sats.